Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I am recording this on November 4th. I voted for Cuomo to stop Mamdani from taking over the city of New York. Hopefully, Mamdani loses. All right, with that, let's continue on with the show. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex, because you probably will have indigestion when you turn on your news tonight and you start realizing, well, wait a minute, a socialist won. Digestive enzyme complex will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and reduce the load on your pancreas. This is very important to take, especially if you're 40 years of age or older, to lessen the load on your pancreas. No matter how healthy you are, your pancreas doesn't function as well as when I was younger. So please go to my store, get the digestive enzyme complex, take it every day, and this will help to break up your food and help you to absorb and put less load on your digestive system. In addition, this has bromelain. Bromelain is an enzyme that helps to break up clots. It's fibrinolytic. In addition, digestive enzyme complex also has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. Super important, especially for the fall and the winter. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You can get the digestive enzyme complex and stack it with some other great products that I have. In addition, because we're in the fall and winter season, you need to get the vitamin C and magnesium. This is a dual purpose supplement. This will help with the health of your skin, boost up brain function, and boost up your immune system. Magnesium and zinc helps with brain function and the immune system. Take them together, take them every day. When you're doing that, you're slowing down the aging process, improving your brain function, and boosting up your immune system. But especially take this during the fall and the winter. You need to boost up that immune system. Please go to my store, get the vitamin C and magnesium, and the magnesium and zinc. Drink it with filtered water. And you can stack it with the digestive enzyme complex. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into
Let's bring in New York City native Florida Congressman Byron McDonald, who's running for governor in the Sunshine State. I have, I guess, one question. You've publicly described Democrats and led spending packages as socialistic. How do you define socialism in America?
It's when the government gets too big, it crowds out private investment. You have Democrats who decide they want to use the powers of government over corporate interests, over small business interests. They take away the ability of working families to keep food on the table because the taxes are too high, the regulations are too broad, and people cannot make ends meet. That's what socialism is from the Democrat Party. And it's worse with Mamdani. This guy is a communist. His plans will not work. They've never worked anywhere around the globe. And if you think it's going to work in New York City, it's simply not. I understand people are concerned about the prices. You could blame Joe Biden and the Democrat Party for that. Going from Democrat to communist is not going to save New York City. It's only going to make matters worse.
President Obama gave Mamdani a phone call, but not an endorsement, which is a laugh riot for days and weeks to come. But President Obama was down over the weekend in Norfolk, along with Abigail Spanberger. So Jay Jones showed up as well. He wants to assassinate the opponent, a Republican opponent, and his children. At least he thought about it in text. But tonight, President Trump is holding tele-rallies for New Jersey races, and also for Virginia. And Byron, you have campaigned for Jack Ciattarelli as well. If Ciattarelli and even Jason Miyares win for AG in Virginia, this will be just blue tears cried by the Democrats.
You're absolutely right, but the Democrats only have themselves to blame. What are they campaigning on? They're campaigning on hatred of Donald Trump. who, by the way, is the peace president, who, by the way, has secured the border, who, by the way, has our economy growing again. The country is actually going in a wonderful direction, and they're running against that. This is why Jack Ciattarelli needs to be the next governor of New Jersey, because Mikey Sherrill, she's a radical, just like Nancy Pelosi, just like AOC. She took all the same votes. Abigail Spanberger in Virginia, same thing, a radical. The same issues that are perplexing the American people will not change if Spanberger and Sherrill are the governors of those states. Vote Jack Ciattarelli, vote Winsome Sears.
Well, Congressman, I know that you're, thinking about running for governor. You are running for governor. We're all excited about that. If this was happening in Miami and Orlando and Tampa and Jacksonville, something like what's happening in New York City, what would you do differently?
Well, first of all, let me be clear. It's not going to happen in Florida.
What if it did?
Because in Florida, no, it's not. We have a foundation of conservative, common sense policy in Florida. Ron DeSantis has done a tremendous job leading our state. Our state legislature, state senate, over the decades has been committed to common sense policy. It's not happening in Florida because the people of Florida understand what capitalism and freedom and opportunity means. That's why they keep coming to Florida. That's why we have a 1.4 million voter advantage over the Democrats in our state.
Well, in Congress, there was a bill to refute socialism and it failed. You've talked about that. What does that say about the state of the economy and the debate about the economy in Washington?
Well, look, in Washington, we have a problem with debates overall. In the Senate, we have this logjam because Senate Democrats would rather still go down this socialist line of spending too much money, which is going to decrease purchasing power for the American people. This is why I agree with President Trump calling for an end to the filibuster, because the filibuster does not promote debate in the Senate. What it does is it promotes obstruction in the Senate. Let's not even talk about the economy. Talk about the visas right now, HB1 visas. These are a scam on American workers. American workers have been displaced because of these HB1 visas. It needs to end. But are you going to get reforms to all the visa programs in the United States without being able to get it through the United States Senate? No, you will not. You need to be able to work with people who want to do the right thing on behalf of the American people. The Democrats have proven time and again they only want their radical agenda. And if they don't get their way, they're going to follow Chuck Schumer and just shut the government down. This is not working for the American people. That's why they're frustrated. They want costs down. They want opportunity. They want freedom. And you're not getting that with arcane rules in the United States Senate that don't allow the Senate to work and represent the will of the American people.
Congressman, you brought up the get rid of the filibuster. That's a nuclear option that could open the door for the Democrats to do a lot of harm. But what I do think, I always think about the genius of President Trump and the fact that he's talking about the filibuster. That is exactly what the Democrats in the Senate are doing. They are filibustering this continuing resolution. When it is passed out of the House, they voted it down, 15, more than a dozen times in the Senate. They're filibustering this to try and prop up a bunch of half-assed candidates in places like the Commonwealth of Virginia and Jersey. It's a filibuster. That's brilliant on his part to call it, to start talking about it what it is.
Look, Dagan, I want to go through, you are absolutely right. What's going on in the United States Senate now is that it is better for the Democrats just to obstruct than actually work on real common sense solution. Donald Trump came into office, he secured our border. We have 0 illegal border crossings. But let me inform the American people, those are executive orders from President Trump. In order for his policy on the southern border to become law, you got to get it through the Senate, which means you have to clear the filibuster. The Senate Democrats are not going to allow his border policies to become law, because they opposed it. They supported Joe Biden and his radical border policies. That's reason number one. Reason number two, I just mentioned visas. HB1s are a scam. It needs to end. If you're gonna reform visas, you gotta be able to get rid of the filibuster to do it the right way for the American people. And we can go down the list. Energy, spending policy, etc. Regulatory burdens in the United States of America on every business, large and small.
That's right.
The obstructionists are the Senate Democrats, because they follow Bernie Sanders, they follow Elizabeth Warren, they follow AOC, and the crazy radical Marxist left. And at this point in American history, and I get it, let me clear this up for everybody. And I know people are concerned about the filibuster. Here's the facts. if the Democrats have the trifecta, they're gonna use it. They're gonna get rid of the filibuster, they're gonna pack the courts, they're gonna make DC a state, and they're gonna change every election law in this country so they hard code America into universal Democrat control for as far as the eye can see. The Democrats have said this, they're on the record. That's their plan, that's their position.
Right.
And so I take them at their word,
Okay.
which is why we need to push common sense policy. It's time for the filibuster to go.
Well, we see that they're willing to starve people for political power and deprive them of food stamps. And we see them willing to put people's airline safety at risk for their own
And
political
the federal
program.
workers, yeah.
Right.
That's right. That's
Congressman
absolutely right.
Byron Donalds, and Florida's never going left because of all those Cuban refugees who live down there. They remember, and the people who fled Venezuela. Good to see you,
That's
sir.
right there. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
A peace plan for Gaza. For the plan to advance, Hamas must disarm. Instead,
denies terrifying. The left-wing policies were defeated in the last election, but that hasn't stopped them. And if Mamdani is elected, that'll embolden them further. There is a rift within the party. There are a few Democrats like Tom Suozzi and Josh Gottheimer who were in the Congress. I worked with Josh in the Clinton White House. They have spoken out against Mamdani, and they do fear what's going to happen if he does get elected. So that is a real concern. So there is a schism underway, and I think his election will exacerbate that.
Today is the last day of campaigning for the New York mayoral candidates, with polls opening tomorrow morning. President Trump's weighed in and warned that he may reduce funding for New York if the Democratic nominee, Zoran Mamdani, who is currently the front runner, wins the election.
It's going to be hard for me as the president to give a lot of money to New York, because if you have a communist running New York, all you're doing is wasting the money you're sending there. So I don't know that he's one, and I'm not a fan of Cuomo one way or the other, but if it's going to be between a bad Democrat and a communist, I'm going to pick the bad Democrat all the time, to be honest with you.
Well, Mamdani has previously been criticised by his rival candidate, Andrew Cuomo, for his lack of experience.
He has no experience. And this is not a job for someone who has no management experience to run 300,000 people, no financial experience to run $115 billion budget. He literally has never had a job. On his resume, it says he interned for his mother. This is not a job for a first timer. Any day, you could have a hurricane, you have, God forbid, a 9/11, a health pandemic. If you don't know what you're doing, people could die.
Mr. Mamdani, want to respond? And if we have a health pandemic, then why would New Yorkers turn back to the governor who sent seniors to their death in nursing homes? That's the kind of experience that's on offer here today. When I don't have an experience, I make up for in integrity. And when you don't have an integrity, you can never make up for an experience.
Well, that was Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic candidate and front runner. Let's talk to Jim Kennedy, who's a Democratic strategist and a former advisor to Bill Clinton. Good evening to you, Jim.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate being here.
Now, I know there's been quite a buzz about Zoran Mamdani. He's pretty left-wing, he's pretty young. Why do you think he has put himself in the position where he's very much the front runner to win this election when voters go to the polls tomorrow?
Well, he is a talented campaigner. He does great videos. He appeals to young people. Young people don't have a negative association with socialism that older voters do. So he's kind of riding a tide of popularity in that regard. However, I think his election would be bad for New Yorkers and bad for the Democratic Party nationally.
Why do you say that?
Because I think he'll become a poster child for Democrats. Republicans will label him, their opponents, Mamdani Democrats, the way they did with McGovern Democrats in the 70s. And they'll say that he stands for more crime, more communism, and more costs. And so I think his policies, his socialist policies, would really fail New Yorkers, and that would be translated to the national scene in the midterm elections next year, and possibly in 2028 as well.
I mean, this is being seen as a really important contest. The Democrats have, as I'm sure you would perhaps acknowledge, since the last presidential election, been really struggling to galvanize themselves and unite around a single message. Is the risk here that the Democrats decide that, well, maybe they've got to move further left, as Zoran Mamdani appears to be suggesting?
That is a problem. The Democrats do have an identity crisis underway. They certainly were defeated. The left-wing policies were defeated in the last election, but that hasn't stopped them. And if Mamdani is elected, that'll embolden them further. There is a rift within the party. There are a few Democrats like Tom Suozzi and Josh Gottheimer who were in the Congress. I worked with Josh in the Clinton White House. They have spoken out against Mamdani, and they do fear what's going to happen if he does get elected. So that is a real concern. So there is a schism underway, and I think his election will exacerbate that.
He has, of course, come up with some pretty eye-catching proposals. He's said he's going to freeze rents on rent-stabilized apartments. He's going to provide universal childcare, free buses, city-owned grocery stores. I mean, there are many people in New York struggling to make ends meet. That's a pretty attractive message, isn't it?
Well, it may be attractive in words, but it's not going to be attractive in reality. He'll transform New York into Havana on the Hudson, because we've seen what's happened in places like Cuba. Even China, which obviously was a communist country, they really turned to free enterprise beginning in the 90s, and they actually helped elevate many millions of people out of poverty because they went from socialism towards free enterprise. Now they still have a strict control over the politics in that country, but free enterprise really is the answer to human aspiration and human success and prosperity, not socialism. The best thing to happen if Mamdani is elected is if he fails at implementing those policies.
Well, I mean, it's interesting as
Famously smooth whiskey, and we're famous in Big Fan. It knows it. He's supposed to be one of us. Even when he shows up uninvited, he's never empty-handed. You see, he's nearly as smooth as our whiskey. It must be a Jameson.
well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that he does appear to be on course for victory. I mean, I wonder whether that's partly because when you look at his opponents, I mean, he's up against Andrew Cuomo, who was a Democrat New York governor, but had to resign over this big scandal over the sexual harassment allegations, and Curtis Sliwa, the Republican, who's probably unlikely ever to win over such a strongly Democratic city as New York.
Yeah, it's an unusual race. I do think Cuomo has an outside chance to win. I used to work for Joe Lieberman. He ran as an independent against a Republican and a Democrat in Connecticut, and he actually succeeded because he appealed to a combination of Democrats and Republicans and independents. Cuomo's going to have to pull that off if he does succeed. So it's a really unusual race. And New York has an unusual electorate. Doesn't really represent America, even though it's the biggest and most important city in America. It's going to be interesting to watch. I think Mamdani is the odds-on favorite, but there has been a lot of early voting happening, and that could cut both ways. A lot of younger voters are coming out. That probably helps Mamdani. On the other hand, a lot of voters from maybe Staten Island or the Queens, older voters, they may come out and support Cuomo. So we're going to see how that cuts tomorrow.
And I'm hearing that Elon Musk has actually endorsed Andrew Cuomo. That's pretty unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, you do have both what Donald Trump said and now Elon Musk. I think they fear what's going to happen in New York if Mamdani is elected. Although, again, I think Republicans will benefit politically if he does get elected. So this is a very, very cross-cutting election and very unusual one. You also have Eric Adams, who's the incumbent, who's not running again, but he's supporting Cuomo. Other Democrats have kind of sat out the election. A few of them have endorsed Mamdani. So again, that represents the schism that's happening in American politics.
Interesting, though, the way that Mamdani has already excited a lot of attention from many other left-wing leaders from right across Europe, including Jeremy Corbyn, who's a former leader of the Labour Party here in the UK. He's actually been out there apparently helping to bash the phones for Mamdani.
Yeah, I think Zoran Mamdani is the Jeremy Corbyn of American politics. And I fear that he's going to do to the Democratic Party what Corbyn did to the Labour Party in the UK. It's not surprising that they're for each other. There is a consistency among socialists, but they're consistently wrong when it comes to reality. But they're consistent in their views of free enterprise and human behavior. And so it's not surprising that that's happened, even though I understand Corbyn was against Trump coming out for Boris Johnson. So that's hypocritical, certainly, on his part.
If he does win, though, will it not, nonetheless, just cheer up the Democrats a bit? I mean, they've had a pretty tough ride since the last election, haven't they?
Yeah, it's going to go. We'll see how it plays out next year in the midterms. The Democrats, again, have had a real tough slide over the last couple of years. They need to find a way to appeal to younger voters, but also retain their appeal to centrist voters or even some moderate Republicans. That's the winning combination that Bill Clinton was able to achieve, as well as Barack Obama. You need to put together a coalition. Unfortunately, you can't have a coalition only on the left, which I think is what Kamala Harris did, basically, and I think what Mamdani is doing in New York. A coalition really has to be broad-based and appeal across ideology and not be wedded to one ideology.
Jim Kennedy, Democratic strategist, former advisor to Bill Clinton. Really good to talk to you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree. Some of the stuff, including the Chancellor, a whole bunch of stuff is pretty outrageous about the way that they are behaving. But also, I want to, for a second, pick your brain about what is going to happen tomorrow in New York, which is they're going to elect this Democratic Socialist mayor, right? This green number that exists in that poll in the United Kingdom. The truth is that there are a lot of people that are just done with the constant failures of the system, right? Now, to the left, we are seeing again that a certain version of economic populism is going to come, where somebody like this bloke who's going to become the mayor of New York is able to essentially say, look, I'm going to improve your life by making rich people pay more, right? Essentially, that's because the problem in our community is they've got lots, you've got bugger all, and no one really changes it for you. How fluid do you think that bugger them all vote is, that people might be automatically assuming that it's going to go in the left direction or the right direction, but in many ways, the real debate is about who can change the joint. Who's going to change the joint and actually change it for normal people? Because I have a feeling that might be the closing 6 months of the debate you might be involved in.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, look, the system isn't working, so the centre can't hold. We've seen centrist parties in France disappear completely. Look at Italy. The brothers of Italy. Meloni is the prime minister and actually doing a very good job. And yes, the same applies to the left as well. It's just that, socialist Marxism gets forgotten, and we keep reminding how bad it is once every generation or so. And it looks like that's what New York is about to go through. This idea that if you tax the rich, you have more revenue that you can share with everybody presupposes that people won't flee. And the modern world we live in, you can move your wealth by literally pressing a button on your personal computer. And I think we'll see a flight from New York. I've got a lot of friends in New York. I used to work for a New York company for many, many years. And already the move has started. You're seeing Miami absolutely exploding in size. You're seeing Dallas, Austin in Texas growing in size. And I'll make you a prediction. Staten Island will seek independence from New York if Mamdani wins. Staten Island. That's my next campaign.
Imagine going to the US Congress and talking about that there should be a separation. Right? I like it. Staten Island exit. We'll see. Yeah. We'll come up with better minds than I do. Now, also, what about how school kids are being taught about your party? Right? Like, again, I just find this stuff so outrageous that there's a free hand amongst parts of the education system to be able to turn around, and while kids are learning about a system, being told that there is emotional value about the players in the system, right? This party's good, this party's bad, this one's good, this one's bad. That is not the role of an educator to put the value judgment, but they're doing it, mate, and they're doing it right to you.
Yes, they are. I mean, there was this big piece in the Mail on Sunday showing that they basically put reform on the left-right spectrum alongside a swastika. I mean, quite extraordinary. Actually, very, very insightful and very, very hateful. You know, it's telling teenage kids that these people are equivalent to the Nazis, and that, of course, in turn leads to online abuse, street violence. No, the job of an educator is to teach critical thinking. The job of an educator is to put things on the table and say, you make your mind up which of these things you think is right. So the left-wing bias that runs through the British education system is shocking. And I tell you what, that is something that the government needs to do. It needs to root out extremism in teaching, and it even starts, you know, right down in the early years and runs all the way through university. And it's a problem not just in Britain, it's a problem right across the Western world. The march of the hard left through the institutions, and in education for the moment, they triumph.
Well, the reality is some of the woker stuff is happening to the youngest, right? Not even into the university sector. Nigel, thank you so much. We'll cheer you on from Australia, mate. We look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thank you.
Zoran's affordability plan, what should
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get these dual-purpose deodorants. This will help as a deodorant, but also detoxify your body. When you detoxify your body regularly, you're helping your immune system and endocrine system. These deodorants are for males and females. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, or in citrus. These have no aluminum, no baking soda. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, all natural ingredients, very high quality. Again, it's dual purpose. Use it as a deodorant, and it helps to detoxify your body. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the deodorant bars. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off anyway. Crazy. I tell you, it's just crazy. All right, let's Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney died today. Now, I don't feel bad for him. You know why? Because he stood down during 9/11 to allow it to happen. And ushered in the Patriot Act. And oh, by the way, created an excursion in Iraq, even though we couldn't find weapons of mass destruction. The guy literally stood down during 9/11 to allow it to happen. All right, let's listen into Dick Cheney dying.
I had a crazy idea. We were surprised that no one had done it before.
Success doesn't follow a formula.
We have a Fox 10 News alert to share with you this morning. Former Vice President Dick Cheney has died. He served in the White House alongside President George W. Bush and played a major role in leading the U.S. into the Iraq War. Cheney was 84 years old. We are told his family was with him when he passed.
If you decide 2025, it is election day. There's some pretty important decisions that voters right here in Arizona are making today.
Irene Snyder joining us live this morning with everything you need to know. Good morning, Irene.
Good morning, guys. Voters here in Arizona will mostly be deciding on bonds and other propositions. And this year, it is an all-mail election here in Maricopa County. Voters were mailed a ballot just last month. If it hasn't already been sent back, you should drop it off at an election box or a voting center today. Ballots should be returned before 7 p.m. If you did not receive your ballot or need a replacement, you can do that at voting centers too. One of the most watched issues on the ballot is Prop 409. 409 would give Valleywise Health nearly $900 million to expand services and build a new hub.
We're going to go to BBC talking about Cheney, the guy that stood down during 9/11 to allow for the excursion in the Middle East. You know, the inside job.
But right now, I want to bring you a bit of breaking news that will have a
a global significance and a global resonance, and that is the former US Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. The former US Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. That has been confirmed in a family statement. So we don't have any more details of that family statement right now, but we will have shortly plenty of details and indeed plenty of reaction around the world. Influence in global events is difficult to be overstated. He served as America's 46th vice president. That was under George W. Bush. That was 2001 to 2009. So a really significant figure in US politics for decades, and for US and global politics, particularly for that decade. He was, of course, a key architect of the so-called War on Terror after 9/11, an early supporter of the invasion of Iraq, and as such, became a hugely divisive figure in global geopolitics. He had the support and backing of many in US politics, in the Republican Party especially, during his time and term in office. But the subsequent wave, the fallout from the Iraq invasion, the fallout from those search for WMD's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, he was a supporter of that claim, and that was subsequently found to be not true. So just some details from that family. He was 84 years old. The family statement just saying that he died last night, and we are waiting for more details on that. He was 84 years old. We understand it was complications of pneumonia, one of the causes of death last night for the 84-year-old Dick Cheney. Now, as for the legacy, well, he worked a storied political career, very successful political career within the Republican Party, rising up through the ranks, winning elected office. He worked for a Republican congressman. He worked eventually for President Gerald Ford. He became a congressman for a decade for Wyoming. And then his big break, his rise to national and more international prominence was President George H.W. Bush made him Defense Secretary. And as Defense Secretary, that's when he had to handle the first Gulf War after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, of course. And then when George W. Bush needed a vice presidential candidate later on, Cheney actually chaired the search committee to try and find one, but ended up doing the job himself. And then the events of 9/11, the attack on US soil. And after that attack, he defended the subsequent events. So that was the claim that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He defended also waterboarding as an interrogation technique after 9/11. And there were geopolitical fallout, of course, from those momentous events in Iraq after the war there. After that, he went on to have some health problems. He had a heart transplant in 2012. As he got older, he became, even though he was a lifelong Republican and viewed by many on the right of the Republican Party, but he then went on to become a big critic of Donald Trump. He didn't fall into line like many senior Republicans did and have. He maintained himself as a critic of Donald Trump. He thought that Donald Trump was undermining institutions like NATO and
undermining institutions. Look at this. Look at this. Cheney stood down and allowed 9/11 to happen. He stood down. He allowed it to happen. The guy's a globalist. He made millions of dollars running Halliburton. This is a classic example. This is a classic example of the neocon globalist that Trump is actually trying to fight. Not only is Trump trying to fight communism and socialism and the crazy ultra left, but he's also trying to fight these types of people that had these policies, these neocon policies, and he also represented this idea of just ship the jobs overseas. If there is a hell, which I think there is, but hopefully there is, he's going to be burning in it. Cheney, Dick Cheney, burning in hell. Details at 11.
The outcome of the 2020 election as well. Now, it is a political family as well of Dick Cheney. He has his eldest daughter, Liz, another anti-Trump member of Congress for many years, and his younger daughter, Mary, entered a gay marriage, which led to Dick Cheney then supporting that move. So Dick Cheney just announced in the last few minutes that confirmation from a family statement that he has died at the age of 84. We understand he died last night through complications of pneumonia as one of the potential causes of death at 84 years old. A remarkable and at times incredibly divisive political career. He supported Republican members of Congress. He worked for Republican presidents, and he became vice president himself and came to dominate the geopolitics of that age. He was one of the key architects of war in Iraq, the response of the US to the 9/11 terror attacks on its soil. He retained the popularity of many within America, especially many Republicans during that time and afterwards. However, in other parts of the world, more directly impacted by US military act.
Dick Cheney represented a deep state. And that deep state ushered in the Patriot Act. And that eroded our constitutional freedoms. And he stood down during 9/11 to allow it to happen. This guy is a fucking asshole. Push jobs overseas, destroy our manufacturing base. Oh, let's just have globalization on steroids. Oh, let's have a war and say to the American public that there's weapons of mass destruction, even though he knew that there weren't.
He became a much more divisive character. He was extraordinarily well-known and well-connected within the Republican Party, serving for generations and decades. And there will be many who point to his skill in roles such as Chief of Staff, his skill in terms of basic politics and pure politics and Republican Party politics. And indeed, there is no doubting a man of true influence and significance the early part of this century. We will be expecting now, of course, plenty of reaction, not just from the US, but from right around the world. It is still, of course, relatively early there in the US. So what is it, 11:30 here in London, so 5 hours earlier Eastern time in America. So it's clearly quite early in the morning, and we understand from sources that he died last night, American time, at the age of 84, the end to a remarkable life and at times divisive career, but a remarkable life, and also in a way the establishment of another political dynasty family with daughter joining him in politics, daughter joining him in the Republican Party politics, and also joining him in the critical role of criticizing Donald Trump, as they saw him and his daughter, many senior Republicans of their generation who had been early critics of Donald Trump. Lots of them changed their mind, fell into line, as many saw it, abandoned some of those core Republican conservative beliefs to adopt the Donald Trump agenda, but not so the former US Vice President Dick Cheney, and not so Liz, both of them powerful and relatively rare critics of the new
and you
Donald
know,
Trump.
you remember the debate at the Reagan Library? And they were having this was the primary debates for the Republican Party, right in front of that plane, right in front of Air Force One for Reagan. And what did he say? You remember what Trump said? And he went right after Jeb Bush. He was talking about how the establishment, ushered in a multiple year war in Afghanistan and Iraq because of 9/11 and the whole neocon issue of a never-ending war in the Middle East. You remember that? That's what this guy represented. That's what this guy represented. He didn't care. He fucking didn't care. Dick Cheney was a major problem in the United States in terms of foreign policy. Major problem. Unbelievable. All right, let's go to MSNBC.
The family of former Vice President Dick Cheney released the following statement. Richard B. Cheney, the 46th Vice President of the United States, died last night, November 3rd, 2025. He was 84 years old. His beloved wife of 61 years, Lynn, his daughters Liz and Mary, and other family members were with him as he passed. The former vice president died due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. For decades, Dick Cheney served our nation, including as White House Chief of Staff, Wyoming's Congressman, Secretary of Defense, and Vice President of the United States. Dick Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness.
Neocon ushered in hyperglobalization, lied to the American public about a war in Iraq, and stood down during 9/11 and pushed the Patriot Act that eroded your constitutional freedoms. This guy should burn in fucking hell.
And fly fishing. We are grateful beyond measure for all Dick Cheney did for our country, and we are blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by this noble giant of a man. Dick Cheney has passed away.
He lived this life really in three acts. This public life, the first was, and we were talking about this.
And then he was a headwind for Trump, trying to slow down Trump's policies of America first, right? Trump's representing America first. Get out of hyperglobalization. Start bringing back constitutional freedoms. Start truncating the deep state. Oh, Cheney didn't like that. Oh, wait a minute. You're talking. You want to make the deep state smaller, Trump? Oh, the establishment's going to go after you. That's what Cheney represented. And he was a patriot? How the hell could he be a patriot? Oh, let's just keep on printing more money and lying to Congress and just allow that deep state to just keep on eroding your constitutional freedoms. Dick Cheney was a dick.
Off camera, Willie. The first act was as actually sort of seen as a moderate, highly respected voice in Congress as a minority whip. There's a point in David Stockman's book where they were talking about the Reagan Revolution and the cuts they were making, and they kept pushing forward. And then at one point, he said, Dick Cheney just quietly said in the room, "That's enough." can't go any further. And David Stockman said, with a man this respected, a voice, this large in Congress, we knew we had pushed the outer boundaries. Then, of course, post 9/11, he was seen as Darth Vader, called Darth Vader by many people because he supported what I think a lot of Americans supported, what was called the 1% solution. And he was determined, Dick Cheney was determined that from that moment on, after 9/11, there would never be another 9/11 again. And he was going to do whatever he could to stop it. And we'll talk to Jim Vandehei about this in a minute, but he also was seeing reports.
Don't you find it serendipitous that Dick Cheney, the guy that stood down 9/11, eroded your constitutional freedoms because of the Patriot Act, ushered in a war in Iraq under false pretenses. He didn't stop there. Then he tried to demonize and slow down the movement that people were supporting Trump because he wanted to maintain, Dick Cheney wanted to maintain the deep state. He ushered in hyperglobalism. And guess what? He was such a great man. Yeah, Dick Cheney was such a great man. But don't you find it so odd, just through serendipity, that he dies, he died last night on the eve of a major election that's taking place in New York City, where we are most likely going to have a Muslim extremist, communist being voted in as mayor. And I thought we were supposed to never forget 9/11. New Yorkers, especially the ultra liberals, are stupid. But part of the problem that accentuated this stupidity was the neocon ultra conservatism that led to a 20-year war in the Middle East that should have never happened. Yeah. Dick Cheney was part of the deep state to get the Vietnam that they never had. And just keep on printing out those trillions of dollars for the military-industrial complex. That's what Dick Cheney represented.
Yeah, that would have scared the absolute hell out of any American that had access to all the threat of the year. And then finally, the third act, of course, one of these Republicans, that were seen as a defender of democracy. When so many others lost their way, Dick Cheney kept his bearings after January the 6th, always kept his bearings when it came to democratic norms. And he was on the right side. I think most, certainly Republicans from my era would believe. And I think we all should be grateful to him for that.
One of his last public acts was about a year ago when he put out a statement saying, I'm going to be voting for Kamala Harris in this presidential election. Dick Cheney, Darth Vader, as you said, the fates of the Republican Party in many ways in the Bush years, said Donald Trump can never be trusted with power again, appearing with his daughter Liz Cheney.
Really?
Who was one of the
Can't be trusted with power, yet Trump is spending a lot of effort to try to bring peace to this world. Dick Cheney didn't bring peace to this world. Dick Cheney took away your constitutional freedoms. Dick Cheney ushered in a surveillance state. Dick Cheney pushed for more government, more of a security state. That's what Dick Cheney gave. Oh, and so the person that stood down during 9/11, we're supposed to take at face value that he's correct in stating that Trump can't be trusted? What? Dick Cheney could be trusted when he lied to the American public about weapons of mass destruction and took away your constitutional freedoms in the process? No. People need to wake up. Trump is going after the deep state. And the deep state's going after him. 2 attempts on his life? The constant lawfare? I mean, you gotta wake up. I mean, anyone that's looking at this with wide eyes would realize that the government is after Trump. But it's not because he's a bad guy. Trump is trying to truncate the deep state. Dick Cheney. Oh, MSNBC. Dick Cheney's such a great guy because he was going to vote for Kamala. Telling you. Dick Cheney, his principles, did he work on principles? Yes. Were those principles in line to constitutional freedoms and protecting the homeland? In many ways, no.
Trump administration. He actually, if you go back even further, was the chief of staff to Gerald Ford,
Right.
then ran for Congress where he served for 10 years, Secretary of Defense under George H.W. Bush during the Gulf War, then became the CEO of Halliburton. And then, of course, the years that many people remember post 9/11, Jim. He was a supporter of the invasion of Iraq, which turned out to be on faulty intelligence. Also supported the enhanced interrogation techniques, torture of enemy combatants, and all of that. So that is most certainly a big part of his legacy, but there was a lot more to the man.
I mean, we've all been doing this a long time. I've been doing it 30 years. He's by far and away the smartest thinker about the mechanics of government that I've ever met, and it's not close. I was lucky that I interviewed him several times. I went with him to Auschwitz when he went there, and then after the presidency, we would go out and see him occasionally at his house because he knew everything. He knew every lever of government because you just walked through his resume. He understood how Congress worked. He understood how the bureaucracy worked. He understood, I had all these relationships, even post-presidency, with all these world leaders. He just understood power. And there's times where people hated him. A lot of people loved him. But he was also he was his own man, right? When he came out post 9/11, people don't realize the reports that he and President Bush were getting.
It's easy to be your own man when you are a multimillionaire from Halliburton. And Halliburton was heavily involved in the Middle East. Trust me.
Days after 9/11, and it really turned him dark. It made him feel like we can never let this happen again. He was willing to do things other people weren't willing to do. He got a hell of a lot of criticism for that. And what he would say is that was a very principled view based on the threat matrix that he was seeing. And then right before his death, the idea that Dick Cheney would be leading the Republican charge against the president, an elected president, and the leading nominee would have been unthinkable. He was a party guy, but he was a principled guy, and he understood the Constitution, he understood history, and he understood, in his mind, he felt like there was a legitimate threat to it.
Yeah, and
he understood the Constitution, yet he ushered in the Patriot Act, bloated out the national security state, and eroded your constitutional freedoms. Trump's coming in and trying to do the reverse. Bring back your constitutional freedoms, truncate, shrink, eliminate this bloated out post 9/11 national security state that actually tried to take him down. So of course that Cheney is going to go against Trump because Trump is the inverse of Cheney. Cheney stood down to allow 9/11 to happen.
He would say, Jonathan Lemire, about the post 9/11 record, he would say, how many attacks did we get after 9/11? That was my goal, he would say. And you can look and see the number of Americans.
Maybe 9/11 wouldn't have happened if the Air Force blew away those planes. He stood down. Just don't forget, he stood down. He stood down. Maybe 9/11 wouldn't have happened. And if it didn't happen, then we wouldn't have been in Afghanistan or Iraq. And did we win in Iraq and Afghanistan? No.
I think more than half of America believed more attacks were coming, and they would come in successive waves against us. There was such shock. So again, he would say, look at the record, look what happened. We didn't get attacked again. There was, of course, the Iraq War, which I actually believe will probably be, when the obituaries are written, there will be talk of, again, all three chapters of his life. The first and the third is protective democracy. But in that second, I think as much as the war on terror.
Protector of democracy in his third chapter, going after Trump, as if Trump is taking away your democracy. First, we have a constitutional republic. The one that took away your constitutional freedoms was this jackass, under the disguise of the Patriot Act. No. He represents the deep state, and the deep state needs to be taken out.
Going to be a success. The blind spot was going into Iraq.
Yeah, and those two things sort of became linked in the public narrative. The war on terror, of course, and Iraq. His administration did that. So it is hard to prove in some ways, look, we've stopped these terror attacks because so much of it was classified, you can't reveal it. It's hard to come out with that success story. It's much easier to see the visible failure, and the justification of the Iraq war and what it led to was certainly a failure for Vice President Cheney. We should just note for the viewers, that was the text I had received in case you're wondering if there's something else coming. This we were trying to confirm.
The big story here is the juxtaposition, the serendipitous aspect of news, where Dick Cheney dies, Darth Vader dies, and Mamdani has an extreme high probability of becoming the mayor of New York, a Muslim socialist, pushing Marxism. America forgot 9/11.
I've heard from people like, what's going on? So I was like, this is what it is. We're going to run it through normal channels before we went with it on air. But we should also know, to your point a moment ago, it's because he was seen as the power behind the throne, the architect of the Bush administration, Darth Vader. So, and I would argue, the most disliked politician by Democrats we have had in decades until Donald Trump. That's why his endorsement to come out against Donald Trump, not just say, I'm going to sit this race out, but I'm not going to vote for Trump, but to come out the other way and back a Democrat and Vice President Harris, it was, to a lot of people, very meaningful.
But what is the through line on all of those things? Dick Cheney did what he thought was best for America. Politics be damned. Whether he did it as a highly respected member of the House.
He felt that a bloated out government managing through the national security state, eroding your constitutional freedoms was better for the country. That's what Dick Cheney represented in hyperglobalization that gutted American manufacturing. That's what Dick Cheney represented. Now, do you think after going through this 25-year arc that America is in a better place? We have a major city that's going to turn communist. New York City. We have a bloated out national security state that continues to erode your constitutional freedoms. Look at what was transpiring under Biden. What about Barack Obama? The overuse of a surveillance state to try to prevent a presidential candidate. All the lawfare that was happening. No, Dick Cheney represents something evil.
Minority leadership, whether he did it as Secretary of Defense, also something that will be seen as a very positive chapter in his life that a lot of people forget. During the first Iraq War, whether he'll be remembered as Vice President for the ups and downs of that, or whether he'll be remembered as by many of the people who loathed him before as a defender of democracy. And this happens. Mika's father was loathed by progressives in the Democratic Party. Edelou said he was booed at the Democratic National Convention because he took such a hard line against the Soviet Union. And then, after the Iraq War, suddenly every liberal loved him. Yep.
Isn't it ironic that MSNBC, this ultra-lib news network, is putting Dick Cheney on a pedestal, saying, wait a minute, he saved democracy against Trump. I'll tell you, Trump is within the top 3 best presidents that the United States will ever have. And that's right in line with George Washington and Abraham Lincoln.
The two things, I will say, the two things, and I don't think your dad would mind you saying this, the two things these two men shared in common is they really didn't give a damn what the New York Times or Wall Street Journal editorial page said about them. They were going to do what they thought their duty was to
And we live
America.
near each other in McLean, Virginia.
Yeah, and also two guys with enormously big brains. I actually go back to what Jim said a second ago, which is if you really think about the arc of the career, here, this to me is the core of it. When he goes to his first job in politics is working for Don Rumsfeld in 1969. Okay. He's 28 years old.
That's a tough job for him.
He's 20. He's 20.
My brother works
He
there.
goes to the White House as an intern at 28.
Yeah.
And 6 years later, having never left the White House, he's Joe Ford's chief of staff. White House chief of staff, arguably like the most powerful job in America besides president.
Right.
At the age of 34. Okay. That is a prodigy in terms of the understanding of how power works. Before he even went to Congress, he already had operated at the very highest levels of federal power. And that student kind of apprenticeship, and the fact that he was a student of power and the dynamics of power and how Washington works on both sides from the Capitol Hill to the White House and then over to the agencies, just gave him a 360 view of.
Totally agree with that. He knew the system. He knew how to play it. He knew the levers of power. 100%. But he used it to grow the deep state.
Of how modern Washington worked and how power flowed in that city and how to work the levers behind the scenes. That's, I think, as much as anything, the definitive thing. I had a brilliant guy who really understood power in Washington like almost no one else ever has.
Just having a sense of a moment like this, what it's like. My thoughts are with Liz, Mary, and Lynn right now.
I don't give a fuck.
And
I totally did. I don't care about his family. What about all the family members that died under false pretenses in the Iraq War? Why should we give a shit about their family? And not that their family is against America. Are they really America first? They're against Trump. They're not America first. They want a deep state. They want to continue the hyperglobalization. So why should we care about their family? Why? Fucking bullshit. That's what it is. All right, let's listen into CNN about Dick Cheney dying.
Breaking news this morning, former Vice President Dick Cheney has died at the age of 84. For a stretch of about 30 years, it's hard to list many people who had a greater effect on the course of American history. Cheney's family says he died due to complications of pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. The Cheney family released a statement saying, in part, Dick Cheney was a great and good man who taught his children and grandchildren to love our country and to live lives of courage, honor, love, kindness, and fly fishing. We are great beyond measure for all Dick Cheney did for our country, and we're blessed beyond measure to have loved and been loved by this noble giant of America.
Noble giant? Do you understand what the Patriot Act did? It eroded your constitutional freedoms and allowed for a deep state to take over. This guy represented a deep state. This guy represented hyperglobalization. This guy didn't care about America. Dick Cheney is. I think he knew a lot about how to manipulate power. And a certain event happened, aka 9/11, that allowed him to exercise those levers.
CNN's Wolf Blitzer looks back at Dick Cheney's life and legacy.
Gradually, I realized that the person who was best qualified to be my vice presidential nominee was working by my side.
For most of his adult life, Richard Bruce Cheney.
He probably realized that he was going to be the VP when his big daddy Bush told him, Dick Cheney's going to be the VP, son.
He was the ultimate Washington insider.
That I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. The duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
Named as George Bush's running mate in 2000, Dick Cheney quickly forged a public identity as a no-nonsense, disciplined gatekeeper, a powerful politician to whom and through whom access and influence flowed. But his appearance at the very highest levels of government was by no means his first time in the national spotlight. He began his public service career in the Nixon administration, working in several White House jobs dealing with the economy. After President Nixon resigned because of Watergate, Cheney worked for the new president, Gerald Ford, eventually becoming his chief of staff. When that 29-month presidency ended, Cheney returned to the land he loved, to his home in Wyoming. But it was a very short stay. Elected as the state's only member of the House of Representatives, Cheney returned to the Capitol and served for a decade in Congress. He was in the Republican leadership hierarchy when the first President Bush chose him to be his Secretary of Defense.
Faithfully discharge the duties of the office.
In charge of the Pentagon, Cheney was almost instantly engaged in two of the American military's largest and most complicated operations since the end of the Vietnam War. First, he led the removal of Panama's Manuel Noriega from power. And then Operation Desert Storm, the American and Allied response after the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein.
We have in effect destroyed most of the Iraqi army. We have taken out most of the infrastructure. The lights are out in Baghdad.
His experience and steadfastness were of critical importance, and those traits were not unnoticed. Out of government.
And he fucked up even the Gulf War by not pushing all the way to Baghdad. So he fucks up Iraq 1, he fucks up Iraq 2, he fucks up Afghanistan, he erodes your constitutional freedoms, and he goes after Trump. And supposedly on mainstream media, he must be a godsend.
First time in years during the Clinton administration, Cheney became head of the giant oil services company, Halliburton. It was a job that kept him steeped in defense and foreign policy, and a role that later became a lightning rod for his critics. By the time his old boss's son secured the Republican presidential nomination, Cheney's health was a major concern. 3 mild heart attacks and a quadruple bypass before he was 50. Doctors gave him a green light, but shortly after the 2000 election, he suffered another mild heart attack.
I've got a doctor that follows me around 24 hours a day that comes with a job as vice president.
Cheney quickly became a target for Bush administration critics, especially for convening oil and energy industry representatives.
Oh, yeah. Don't you remember Enron? Enron? Yeah. So let's think about it. The energy guy, Dick Cheney, Halliburton, Enron, and he's supposed to be a godsend because he's going against Trump. Dick Cheney has caused more damage to this country that will last decades than what Trump has done. Trump is actually trying to undo a lot of these deep state policies that were implemented during George Bush Jr.
Declining to make public any contents of the sessions. And later, after the terrorist attacks on 9/11, he became at times invisible to the public. Only a few people knew where he was for much of the time. But behind the scenes, Cheney was a driving force behind some of the biggest controversies of the Bush administration. including the second war against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. In 2007, I asked him about mistakes made and concerns among some Republicans that the war had damaged the Bush administration's credibility.
Well, I simply don't accept the premise of your question. I just think it's hogwash.
Cheney's health problems returned after he left office, for a time drastically altering his appearance. Another heart attack in 2010 prompted doctors to implant a battery-operated device to help his heart pump blood. His health seemed to stabilize after a 2012 heart transplant at the age of 71. Cheney largely disappeared from public life until emerging at the site of the January 6th insurrection 1 year after it happened. During a moment of silence on the House floor, Cheney accompanied his daughter, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, also a member of the select committee that investigated the attack. He was warmly greeted by the House Speaker, Democrat Nancy Pelosi.
In our nation's 246-year history, there has never been an individual who was a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump.
Think about that. Think about that. That's what he represented. And think about, go fast forward to where we're at today, with Trump trying to bring peace in the world, stop the neocon. He represented an expansionism of NATO. He literally, his policies literally helped bring on Putin to power because of this expansionism, and led to the war that we have today in the Ukraine. So was Trump the guy that's the bad guy? What about bioweapon development? Oh, it all started in April of 2001 with the SARS platform. 2001, April. That was under Dick Cheney. This guy's a fucking asshole. No, Trump's bad because he's going to actually know what we did at 9/11, because he'll have access to everything. He'll know that the deep state stood down to allow it to happen. You look at those eyes, those are eyes of an individual that put the United States down a course where our constitutional freedoms were eroded and made the world less safe, not more safe. And not only that, eroded our wealth with the hyperglobalization and the never-ending spending for the military-industrial complex in the Vietnam that they finally got, in Iraq and Afghanistan. The 20-year war. That's what he represents right there. And we're supposed to believe that he is some sort of savior to the Constitution and that Trump is the evil guy? Really? Look at that. Does that look like a face? Does that look like a face that you want to trust? Dick Cheney?
Daughter's struggling primary campaign after she came under fire from former President Trump and his devoted supporters over her work on the January 6th committee.
He is a coward. A real man wouldn't lie to his supporters.
When Trump ran for president again in 2024 against Vice President Kamala Harris, Cheney joined his daughter in endorsing the Democratic nominee.
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala.
And Dick Cheney lied to the American public about weapons of mass destruction, and that led to the Iraq War. And then Dick Cheney decides to vote for a dipshit, aka Harris.
Yes.
American politicians have no shortage of critics, and Dick Cheney was no exception. But there were just as many, perhaps more, who saw him as a resolute, disciplined loyalist who wound up becoming one of the most influential and powerful vice presidents in American history.
The most important thing that any vice president needs to know is to understand what it is the president he works for wants him to do.
All right, let's bring in now CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel.
Problem is that George Bush Sr. wasn't smart enough to be president. And so Dick Cheney was literally the president of the United States. In principle. You think that George Bush Jr. was literally running the show? Or do you think it was really Dick Cheney? Darth Vader?
I've covered and known this family for decades. What are you hearing this morning from them?
So first of all, I think it's important to know his family was with him. He was at home. His wife, Lynn, they were married for more than 60 years, was there, as were.
Barrick started SARS development in April of 2001. That was under George Bush Jr.'s presidency. 9/11 happens in September. There were papers that were written, policies starting to be implemented in the Defense Department in dealing with biologics pre-9/11. Dick Cheney was part of the problem. No, but these journalists won't say that because they didn't even bother to look.
His daughters, Liz Cheney and Mary Cheney. And, you know, he was 84 years old. And I think one thing to keep in mind is, you know, we had Dr. Reiner on earlier, who was his cardiologist all of these years. Dick Cheney had 5 heart attacks and a heart transplant along his life. You know, obviously the family is heartbroken today, but they really did have many more years with him than they, you know, expected because of the care he got and advances in cardiology.
And I mean, such a long life in years and in also what he experienced, what he was part of and what he brought about in the world of politics. I mean, it is hard when you're talking about a vice president to think of someone who's had more impact in the office of vice president than Dick Cheney did.
There's no question. He is always held up as one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful vice president. It was not a ceremonial job. It was, he really did the job of government. You know, when former President George W. Bush was looking for a vice president, the truth of the matter is he asked Dick Cheney first. And Cheney said no. And then he became the head of the search committee. And as the two of the men went through other candidates, they came back to Dick Cheney. And so people often joke that he, you know, Dick Cheney did the search for the job and then he took the job. The reality is he was also the person that former President Bush wanted for the job on day one. He also, as we know, became very controversial over the years. He was a lightning rod for critics because of his positions about enhanced interrogation with U.S. detainees after 9/11 and because of his lobbying and campaigning for the Iraq War. But I think one of the things that he told me over the years that's important to remember was, as you recall, on 9/11, President Bush, former President Bush, was traveling. Dick Cheney was at the White House, and he was the one who had to make many of these difficult calls when we really didn't know what was going on 9/11 and what was next. And
he told me that, you know, I asked him over the years, did he have any regrets about enhanced interrogation or any of these very harsh policies that he became criticized for? And he always said that he had no regrets. He never backed down. But the reason was because he said he really was a changed man after 9/11, that he felt his number one priority was to keep the country safe.
When you erode your constitutional freedoms for safety, you no longer have liberty. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This is a month's supply that will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. And by detoxifying your body and bringing down inflammation regularly, it's going to help with brain function. Because by bringing down inflammation at the brain level, your neurons will have less stress and it will maintain that myelin sheath. By bringing down inflammation and detoxifying the vascular system, you're reducing plaque formation. And by bringing down inflammation and detoxifying your body, you're helping your immune system and your endocrine system. This is powerful stuff. Please go to my store and get the heirloom barley. All right, let's listen in on Election Day in New York City.
New Yorkers are headed to the polls today for those who have not voted early in what is turning out to be a very heated mayoral election. Contestant Brewer joins us now with the latest. Good morning.
Yeah, Joe with the surprise announcement there, but what a race. We have seen so many twists and turns here, guys. And then President Trump throwing his support to Andrew Cuomo, telling New Yorkers not to vote for the Republican candidate in the mayoral race. The polls tightening just before today, this voting day. Democratic candidate Zoran Mamdani now leads independent Andrew Cuomo by less than 5%. We've seen this really tighten up. Support for Republican Curtis Sliwa is at 16%. That's down 8 points.
Now think about that.
Poll that we saw.
Think about that.
Money on
All right. The poll between October 31st and November 2nd, Mamdani 44%, Cuomo at 39%, Sliwa at 16%. Cuomo would be winning if if Cuomo was getting only just half of the votes from Sliwa. Sliwa is increasing the probability of Mamdani winning. Sliwa should have never ran because it was almost a guarantee to have a socialist. This is the whole issue. This is the same thing that happened during the presidential election between Bush, Clinton, and Ross Perot. Clinton was an accidental president because of Ross Perot.
Donnie, with 92% chance of winning, puts Cuomo win at 8%. By the way, that sort of flips if you take Curtis Sliwa out of the polling. The polling shows Andrew Cuomo and Mamdani in a much tighter race. All three candidates now campaigning on affordable housing. Mamdani promising rent freezes for rent-stabilized apartments, free buses, universal childcare. Cuomo campaigning on public safety, education, and affordability. And he's pledging to add NYPD officers to invest in schools, to increase affordable housing. And then Curtis Sliwa, of course, has made his entire career on fighting crime, and he's placing crime and safety front and center. He says he has plans to hire 7,000 NYPD officers and says he would restore zoning control decisions to local communities, which then he says would increase affordable housing. Okay, so New Yorkers had 9 days to vote early. You heard Andrew mention that. And boy, did they ever. Early turnout, 750,000 people, and 250,000 people voted in the city election this weekend alone, just in 2 days, according to the city's Board of Elections. 5.3 million people registered to vote in New York City. Independent voters more likely to wait until today to cast their ballots. The projection is 2 million votes cast in this election. And guys, we haven't seen that since the Giuliani-Dinkins mayoral mashups from the late 80s, early 90s. So that's really something. By the way, Andrew Cuomo expected to come to this polling place. We're in Midtown Manhattan. He's expected to come here and cast his ballot today. Curtis Sliwa told us yesterday that he had already early voted. We asked Mamdani, but they didn't get back to us.
So here's the question. Is there any anecdotal evidence about how close this thing really is? We keep saying it's quite close. The polling market obviously suggesting it isn't, but if you look at some of the polls, it seems like it would be. Of course, it would be even closer if Sliwa was not in the race. And I actually wonder how many of those Sliwa supporters ultimately support Cuomo, and whether you think that's a true possibility.
Again, if you look at the latest polling, okay, so not the prediction markets, which is about where money is coming in and where people are trying to make some money on this, but the public policy polling, where you have a margin of error, what you've seen is the race really tighten up, and in part because if Sliwa is now getting 8% fewer voting support, these are likely voters now coming in for Sliwa, then you might imagine they're peeling off for Andrew Cuomo. It's interesting to me that Donald Trump went out on Truth Social and said, oh, I'd rather see a Democrat with a track record of success win than a communist with no track record of success at all, or I think he called him an utter failure. In a city like New York, that typically is so overwhelmingly votes Democrat, does a Trump stamp of approval actually help Cuomo or hurt him? I think if it peels off Republican voters again from Sliwa, that maybe that's where you're seeing some of this momentum for Cuomo.
Tessa Brewer, we will see. We talked yesterday about potentially that backlash. It was so interesting to see Cuomo effectively try to suggest yesterday that the president was not actually endorsing him, suggesting he was a, quote, bad Democrat. I don't know if you heard Cuomo actually repeat that line to try to tell his supporters that, you know, not to think that a vote for Cuomo is a vote for Trump. So there's a lot of mixed messages in all of the situation. Thanks so much.
Politics and bedfellows, yeah.
Navon is Hi, I'm Samina Dwani, Commissioner of Major League Baseball. Navon is a seamless travel booking system that you can use.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Zeolite. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. You should be taking this every day. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. By detoxifying your body, you're helping your immune system, your endocrine system, even your brain function. Please go to my store and get the Zeolite. Take it every day and detoxify your body. All righty, next. Uh-oh. Let's see what's going on. Let's listen in on Sky News Australia.
I mean, Mamdani is a charismatic swindler. I mean, you gotta hand it to him. Like he can light up a stage, but he has just been a swindler his entire life. I think he's likely to win. He's likely to be mayor of New York City.
Very likely.
Yeah, very likely.
I think polling market has it at what? What is the? No,
yeah, that sounds pretty likely.
That's crazy.
Like, how much do the 6% are you?
Can't take it. It's amazing how stupid people are. That they're gonna vote for Mamdani. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. All right, let's listen in on Bloomberg here.
So, John.
Value.
Yeah.
You like value.
Clearly, small caps provide value, but they've provided value for a long time and they've been a value trap. Within the large cap space, where is the value to be found?
So I think within the large cap space, there's a handful of pockets that we particularly like. Particularly when I look at some of the big banks, when I look at the money center banks, those are really printing money.
I'm gonna pivot over to CNBC talking about is AI behind the recent job cuts.
In recent weeks in articles, the Wall Street Journal, about even white collar workers. Stupidly, I'm wearing white collar. Steve Leisman is here, smart enough to wear blue collar. Is AI intelligence, is that to blame? Should investors be wary?
We did a joint research investigative story with this using Gabrielle Ponluz, our retail reporter on .com, myself, Frank Collin. And we looked into this 48,000 jobs at UPS, 14,000 at Amazon, 1,800 at Target, a slew of layoffs has raised fears that AI is already whacking corporate jobs, but not so fast. In some cases, companies could be involved in what we call AI washing, giving the impression that the new technology is already replacing jobs that are in fact being cut due to a downturn in the business, restructuring, or other reasons. Whatever its intentions, look at this. UPS said in its earnings call, and I quote here directly, "We launched our Efficiency Reimagined initiatives to undertake the end-to-end process redesign effort, which will align our organizational processes to the network reconfiguration." Ooh. You get that? It's like gobbledygook. My colleague Frank Holland found there was some AI-related job losses, but 34,000 were linked largely to closing buildings, right-sizing the staffing level, especially in the wake of the online shopping boom from the pandemic. Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, he had to walk back the impression created by both the media and the company itself that recent corporate layoffs were linked to AI. He said, quote, "The layoffs were not really financially driven, and it's not even really AI driven. Not right now, it's culture." Peter Capelli, a professor of management at the Wharton School, says there's little evidence so far that companies are even able to replace workers now at the kind of scale we're talking about.
Using AI and introducing it to save jobs turns out to be an enormously complicated and time-consuming exercise. I think there's still a perception that it's simple and easy and cheap to do, and it's really not.
So far, AI job losses look like mostly the low-skilled and entry-level jobs. Some companies have announced hiring freezes in anticipation of productivity gains from AI. Goldman Sachs surveying 100 of its investment bankers to see how AI is impacting their clients or hiring at their clients, and found that AI-related job losses could lead to workforce reductions of 4% over the next year and 11% over the next 3 years. That's potentially substantial and fast, though it doesn't account for new jobs could be created by the new technology. It also shows it's early days for AI to be responsible for mass layoffs, and that investors need to be wary of regular old job cuts wrapped in AI clothing.
You did point out that at the end that we don't know about job creation from this. There are, we're hoping, there's wishful thinking that it's like so many past disruptions where the new technology is either net the same or even better for employment. I don't know if that is too much to hope for. And the other thing, every employment report that we used to get in the old days, it would be a net number that would include millions of both additions and losses, and that's sort of.
You're absolutely right. It's the churn is where the action is, right? It's 5 million hired or 5 million fired and 5.1 million hired, and that gives you a job being 100,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about the U.S. economy is the dynamism, and actually, it's one of the things that economists follow is that dynamism, and there's been a little less churn. People, locked in the mortgages. We keep looking for that, but now you have the work from home thing, Joe, which enables as well the idea that you can get workers from different parts of the country that don't have to move to different places. There was people who were upset from Amazon who moved when they did the return to office thing. They moved back and then they were fired after that. So that was a concern. But we just want to be. I think what there is there's so much hype and craze and excitement about this new technology. There's this idea that it's happening now.
Well,
it's not happening now.
The idea that you pin everything on it, it must be this, it must be that.
Right.
We just had the
in terms
small
of
business.
in terms of using AI in business processes to make you more efficient, It's going to be very similar to writing macros or scripts in Excel. So the types of efficiencies that you may have had in your business processes is going to be no different than that. At least in the short term. But there's a lot of managers that are just stupid. A lot of managers are stupid. And they think that they're going to be able to solve all of their ills. And they're going to realize they're going to create more problems than actually fixing or improving. Now, what I do think is that individuals that are creative can leverage AI and help enhance their creativity. For example, look at what's happening in the graphic media type industries, marketing. But there is this AI slop that we talked about in a previous video, where if you have an over-reliance and you're not double checking sources of the information and you're just doing the copy paste from the AI, what will happen is that the products that are available will just be sloppy and not refined. So I think it depends on who's using the AI. But I'm concerned that there will be a lot of managers out there when the recession does hit that will think that they'll be able to weather the storm and just use AI scripts or agents. They're using the term agent, AI agent. But what it is it's a macro. It's a macro or a script to do some sort of function, which people have been using for years in Excel. So, but it's not just Excel. The macros and the scripts were just for Excel. But now it's for other processes in business, but it's really no different. Now, what is interesting is looking at engineering and how generative AI can help with design and create interesting body structures or interesting shapes that would perform better with a particular constraint, force constraint. Those are interesting. But a lot of times those types of structures for mass production can't be made. So you still have to tweak it for manufacturing capability. But the vast majority during the recession will over-rely on AI. They will lay off more people and then realize that they need to hire back quite a few of them. But the key here is that there will be a structural unemployment. There will be a structural unemployment when we do get into a recession. We're not in a recession yet. But when we do, there will be a structural unemployment. It won't be cyclical.
John Gibson, the small business paycheck small business report, and they are seeing the highest level of hours worked, the highest level of increased hours worked weekly in a decade. And I asked, is that because they don't want to hire new people? He said, no, it's because they can't find anybody. It's a supply issue.
There's a whole other dynamic going on with immigration and deportation that's part of it. You have some decline in labor force participation. What's going on with the workforce is a huge thing. I found it interesting, though, that he said that wages have not gone up, but hours have gone up. If that's the case, you can expect perhaps some increase in wages down the road, although he did say that was a big part of the inflation outlook. I listened to what he was saying. That's going to be an issue. And then you get to this point where, okay, is AI going to replace workers or complement workers? If you hear David Solomon talk, they're talking more about complementing workers. It does maybe create this hiring freeze, entry-level jobs, and call centers in other places. But right now, a job like Joe Kernig's How could AI possibly replace?
No, it's impossible. It's impossible. You have to have some solid algorithm. You can still buy a buggy whip.
Of course you can.
From Westfield Whip Manufacturing. It's an artisan maker that caters to what they call a very.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the resveratrol. Resveratrol is something that I've been taking for decades. It stacks well with C60 ubiquinol, NAD+, even clarity factor. Resveratrol will help with youthful gene expression, get rid of cells that are in senescence, help with your basal layer for your skin, soak up free radicals in a cell, and help the health of the mitochondria so you have more energy. Take this every day and slow down the aging process. Another way to slow down the aging process and to help with your brain health is to take the Goodnight formula. Take it every night, drink it with filtered water. This will help to get into 3 cycles to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. So you're detoxifying your central nervous system, you're consolidating memory, and you'll be well rested. When you do that regularly, you will slow down the aging process. Please go to my store and get the Goodnight formula. This has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Please go to my store, use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. Let's listen to what Nancy Pelosi has to say about Trump.
My New Year's resolution is to find inner peace so I can consolidate 17 different budget files without completely losing it. Or you could just get data rails. Trust me.
We're here in San Francisco at a Yes on 50 rally. What's the closing argument for Prop 50?
Goodness. It is about who we are as a state and of course as a nation. The fact that the president knew that he was going to lose the House and he then went to Texas to pick up more seats. It behooved us to then counter that. So people say, oh, well, I don't like either of that. And I said, well, we have to defend democracy. But it's not just democracy. My view is that you save democracy at the kitchen table by meeting the needs of people. It's about goodness. By goodness, I mean, you do not say that when it's time to feed the hungry, according to the Gospel of Matthew, that you as Republicans say, we just really can't do that. In fact, they took over $150 billion out of their ugly bill, which they call beautiful, from SNAP, from the food stamp program. I just think that's totally wrong. In fact, I think it's evil.
So are you suggesting that the president's not a good person?
Why don't she spend the $200 million that she ripped off the American citizen by doing insider trading and give it to food programs, food pantries, instead of buying 16 different refrigerators for her mansion?
I'm saying that his policies are not good. I don't know what his, I don't know. Let's not go into that.
Okay. Let's go into a little bit about what this is about, the Proposition 50, which is about redistricting in California. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's against Proposition 50, who helped put independent redistricting, has suggested instead of changing the rules, you should outperform Trump, don't out-cheat Trump. That why do you have to change the rules in the middle of this? Democrats should be competitive as is. How do you respond to this concept that this is like cheating?
I always say to people who are no longer in the game, enjoy your retirement. We're in the fight, and this is how we're going to win.
But what about the merits of what he's talking about? That essentially that if you're living in a place like Huntington Beach or Norco, these deeply red areas that will now have Democratic Congress members most likely, how is that good for you in terms of democracy?
The fact is that the president wanted to rig the system because he knew he would lose. People said, well, 2 wrongs don't make a right. We don't like redistricting mid-decade. We don't think that that's right. But the fact is, we have self-defense for democracy because this is a president who's doing what he's doing to reinforce abolishing the House of Representatives getting rid of the beauty, the exquisite beauty of the Constitution.
I know you said the focus is on Prop 50. I know you said you won't talk about your future until after Prop 50, but there is speculation about what you're going to do next. Can you talk to us just about what the thought process is? How do you weigh the personal and the political?
Well, first of all, when people start, as in the press, speculating she's going to run, she's not going to run, other people file or say they're going to run. You know what that does? That gives me so much support. People calling me saying, I'm for you, I'm for you, I'm for you, representing organizations, representing communities that some of these people are leaders in, but calling and saying, if you go, I'm with you. So it's a lovely thing to see the friendship. I have no doubt that if I decided to run, I would win. That isn't even a question. It isn't arrogant, it's confident. So for me, it's just a question of one thing, winning the House for the Democrats. And that's what we're doing with Proposition 50.
Do you think the Democrats have a better chance of winning the House next time around if you're on the ballot?
No, I'm saying if I'm out there politically active. Yeah, no, politically active.
So Scott Wiener, who's the state senator for this area, who has talked about running for your seat many times, has deferred to you many times, recently got into the race.
Yeah.
Did he give you a heads up? Was that with your blessing?
He gave me a heads up, but I think he's more concerned about other people getting in. And why don't you talk to him about his thing? No, I thought, you know what my message is to all of them?
Yeah.
Fight for Proposition 50 and then make your plans about what comes next. And that's my message to all of them. So some have participated, some not at all, even in seen. I have said I won't do anything until after Proposition 50. So tomorrow night will be very fraught with meaning for all of us.
So obviously, one of the big things about Proposition 50 is for control of the House. And we're seeing right now what a Republican House looks like. We're seeing the shutdown. You've been in there, you've negotiated, you've found off-ramps for men who have strong egos. So what's the off-ramp for this shutdown? What's a deal that allows President Trump to save face, allows Democrats to get what they want, and gets, most importantly, the government back open?
Well, I would say that the off-ramp has to be meeting the needs of the American people rather than the face of, what's his name? Now, you said something about the Republicans in the House of Representatives. They have abolished the House of Representatives. They don't even want to take a vote on anything. It's very strange. They fear Trump. They're puppets of Trump. And Trump doesn't mind shining the light on the strings. He
didn't abolish the House of Representatives. What is she talking about? This woman is crazy.
Terrible. Public sentiment will open up Congress, not saving face for the, what's his name?
What's like one word you'd use to describe Mike Johnson's leadership?
Puppeteer, puppet. Yeah, puppet. It's sad. He's probably a very decent person.
Do you talk to him at all? Does he ever?
Not lately. He doesn't talk to.
Grit, stability, precision. That's the essence of driving. Lawful.
We met in high school and our daughter is 10 weeks old, very fresh. We had this big plan to purchase a new home. We had.
Not lately. He doesn't talk to, we aren't even there. It's not a question of talking. There's nothing there. There's no there. Understand this. The only person that he takes any advice from is insistence, demands from the President of the United States.
I mean, as somebody who reveres the House of Representatives itself, I mean, more than just about anybody, how does it make you feel to see what's happening in the House right now?
Our founders did not want to have, again, how can I say this? It'll sound like I'm awful about Trump because he's just a vile creature. The worst thing on the face of the earth, but
you think he's the worst thing on the face of the earth?
I do, yeah, I do, because he's the President of the United States and he does not honor the Constitution of the United States. In fact, he's turned the Supreme Court into a rogue court. He's abolished the House of Representatives. He's chilled the press. He's chilled the press. He's scared people who are in our country legally, but making them smashing into their cars and the rest. Now, I don't need to even go into that, but that's a whole other story.
But does that not inspire you to want to stay and to keep fighting?
I want to win big tomorrow night. That's my goal.
If Prop 50 passes, the entire country, when? So you're confident, you think it's gonna pass?
Definitely.
So the entire country is watching California. What's the message that California is sending to the rest of the country?
So I think the message from our win is one of hope. We've drawn the line, speak out. Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can accomplish almost anything, without it, practically nothing. But for public sentiment to go there, people have to know. You know, see, I always wear these bracelets. You reminded me of them. I wasn't going to bring it up. But if you, face open up. If you have faith, if you believe in the goodness, charity of others, it gives you hope. Now people can believe that in the goodness of our country, that gives them hope. And that's when my spirituality, my faith in all this conflict, with a strict separation of church and state, but with a commitment to goodness.
Do you have a reaction to this new Jonathan Carl book about what President Obama said to you after Kamala Harris got the nomination?
I haven't read the book. I heard that after she got the nomination.
According to the reporting, that President Obama called you and was frustrated that you endorsed her quickly, and that he wanted there to be.
It wasn't made that way. The President of the United States endorsed her. I had always thought that she would be stronger if she won a process. Not that it would take her place, but if she emerged from that, which she probably would, since she had endorsement of the President of the United States. And that was, I think, the perspective that President Obama was. But once the president, and it happened, he endorsed her. That was it. Now, it's funny that he said that because on the other side of it, her supporters said, I was one of the last people to endorse her, which wasn't even true. But I think I got from both sides. The president, I President Obama is, he's our hero. It's nothing to compare him to. So his view is very important. And I do think we would have been better off if we had a process. But there wasn't probably enough time if the president was going to make an endorsement.
Lastly, I mean, clearly you're in a reflective mood right now. And just when we think about the most important leadership lesson from you, not even just for politics, but just in terms of everybody in their everyday life, what do you think is the most important lessons we can learn from your story?
But I always say to the members, and they tell me back that it was the most useful, is be yourself. Know the power of you. In the history of the world, there's been no one like you. And your authenticity and your just the power of you, the certain person you are, is really what is something that the country needs and society needs, that matter if you don't even go into political arena. I also say to people, this morning we were laughing about this, treat everyone as your friend, but know who your friends are.
I do want to bring in here Richard Gordon, political analyst and host of Unconventional Times, the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And first off, talking about the race for mayor, that is one that is being watched so closely there, not just locally, but we're talking across the country and across the world. Why is it that so many people are paying close attention to this when maybe they didn't pay close attention to the other races for mayor in New York City?
Sure. Josh, if you don't mind, before I answer that, can I just say I was shocked and sorry to hear about the death of Dick Cheney. And I've gotten to know Liz Cheney a little bit. We serve on a board together, and I just wish Liz and her family all the best. Sorry to hear of the loss. As far as Zoran Mamdani goes, he's a phenomenon. I mean, I think the reason people are reacting the way they are is because it goes way beyond politics. And I think in my lifetime, I could think of two examples. One is he, and the other is Barack Obama, where it truly became a movement. I mean, Donald Trump became a movement, I think, after he was elected president. But I think the reason people are reacting the way they are to Mamdani is the youth, the excitement, the optimism, the sense of hope. It's interesting because there's a separation between reality and what he's saying, and people seem to recognize that, and they're okay with it. People understand that he has no control over the buses, but he's still talking about free buses. He has no control over keeping prices low, but he still talks about it, and people are reacting to it. And I think the reason it is getting national and worldwide attention is because it is showing a massive shift in the electorate, and I think a new type of electorate is developing. This is what I learned when he won the primary, that there is a new electorate out there that's completely different than the electorates of their parents, for example. And they're showing a sense of, we want someone who's going to promise us and try is the key word, to lead us to a better place. That's what they're voting for today.
When you look at independent Andrew Cuomo, of course, running as a Democrat, and he did lose the Democratic primary to Zoran Mamdani, you also have Republican Curtis Sliwa. One question I want to ask, is there any chance that Cuomo or Sliwa does win this race, or is it really Mamdani indefinitely?
Well, I don't see any path to victory for Mr. Sliwa. For Governor Cuomo, I think there is a path to victory. It would be shocking at this point. The polls would have to be all wrong. We've seen that before. But look, there were very few people who voted in the Democratic primary a few months ago that elected Mr. Mamdani over Mr. Cuomo. So very few people voted. If there is a massive turnout in certain parts of New York, Queens, Staten Island, for example, two of the boroughs, there is a possibility that Governor Cuomo could put it together. Going back to what I said before, there is a tectonic shift going on, right? In New York City, a lot of the old constituents are no longer there. The constituents that Democrats like Governor Cuomo relied on in the past, Jews, Italians, Blacks, etc. That coalition is breaking apart, partially as people get older and die or move away. And there's a much younger population growing in New York, heavily Hispanic, heavily Indian or subcontinent. There's a change in demographics in New York. There's a change in generations in New York. This election is electrifying that. This election is pointing directly at that. Could Andrew Cuomo win this election? Yeah, 100%. It is possible. The polls would have to be wrong, and he'd have to put together a coalition that we haven't seen yet. His odds are long, but it is most definitely possible. Curtis Sliwa, I don't see that at all.
And this is actually a post just coming in here from Andrew Cuomo. We've seen all of the different candidates kind of posting throughout the morning. They've been doing these different events over the last several days and really over the last several weeks, but definitely picking up over the last 24 to 48 hours. Andrew Cuomo saying polls are open in NYC. I am asking for your vote. A vote for experience to make change, a vote for public safety, and a vote for economic opportunity. New York City is the greatest city on earth. Let's make her shine again together. Find your polling place here. So if you do want to find your polling place, that's one location you can go to. That is Andrew Cuomo's page on X. One thing.
Hey, Josh, if you don't mind, can I just make a comment about that?
Yeah.
A vote for experience. I find that fascinating, and I think that's a word, experience. We're going to look back on this election and talk about a lot. When I talk to people about who they're voting for in New York, it's fascinating that experience doesn't seem to matter to a lot of people. When you put together the experience of Andrew Cuomo, his many years in politics, his 3 terms as governor, attorney general, secretary of HUD, all this, he built the Second Avenue subway, he did LaGuardia, he did the Moynihan Center. You look at this massive experience, and then you compare it to Mr. Mamdani, who's been in public life for 4 years, has never passed anything. People don't care anymore. They're almost saying, to heck with the experience. We want to go in a different direction. And I think it's fascinating that Governor Cuomo, even this morning, is talking about experience. I'm finding the electorate is saying, I don't care about experience. I want a real change here. And I think that's what this election's about. It is change versus experience. I think change has got the upper hand.
This is exactly the same problem that happened during the McCain versus Obama election.
When we go kind of on that same topic here, one thing that stood out to me that I wanted to ask you about, President Trump put out that statement last night on Truth Social. Now, he didn't really endorse Cuomo, but he kind of did, because he said, don't vote for Sliwa, don't vote for Mamdani, vote for Cuomo. And the thing that stood out to me is he said a vote for Sliwa is a vote for Mamdani. So what do you make of that?
Well, it's always hard to know with the president when he says something and what he's really trying to accomplish here. I think on one hand, Donald Trump's a New Yorker, and I think he's looking at the election. He's known Andrew Cuomo and his father, Governor Mario Cuomo, for decades. And I think on one level it was just an honest expression of, I think Andrew would be a better governor, a better mayor. On the other hand, you gotta wonder, because Mamdani would clearly be the poster boy for the Republicans in beating up on Democrats for years to come as this democratic socialist. And I think on one hand, it's playful because I think he knows Mamdani is going to win and he's put his stake in the ground. But two, I think as a New Yorker, I think the president is saying, you know what, Sliwa cannot possibly win. Andrew Cuomo, I might not like him a lot, but he'd be a decent mayor. I could work with him. I think that's what the president's trying to say.
Not really technically an endorsement, I guess, when you do look at it from every angle here. What I want to do is pop this up here on your screen. This is actually a post from Fox 5 New York. It says officials say it's the highest turnout for a non-presidential election year in city history and 4 times higher than the early vote count during the 2021 mayoral race. We know from the officials there in the city with the election board that essentially about 735,000 people came out during early voting. They expect the numbers will be high once again today. And what you're looking at here is a live look inside one of the polling sites. Why do you think we have seen such immense attention as far as the early voting numbers and the fact that so many people are still going to vote today? What does that tell us, if anything?
Well, I think it tells us a lot. First of all, 2021 was one of the all-time most boring races for mayor in New York, and very few people voted. Voting in New York has gone down dramatically over the last number of years. But what it tells us on the upside, on the positive side, is people are turned on. People are excited. You have 2 things going on in New York. At the same time, a very positive thing, a very negative thing. The positive side is people are excited. They're charged up. They want to vote. My big question today is what's going to be longer, the lines at TSA or the lines to vote for mayor of New York? I think both are going to be huge. So I think that people are excited. They want to vote. They're sending a message today. I'm expecting a massive turnout. On the negative side, there are a lot of people who are very nervous, extraordinarily nervous about, here's a word no one ever used in this election, assemblyman. Mamdani. It's been interesting that his title has never been used at all, ever, in this election, which I find obviously calculated, but interesting. There are a lot of people who are very, very scared. Business people, ethnic groups who are very nervous about him. They're going to turn out in droves also. And it's going to be a battle of which group turns out more. Young people tend not to turn out. They're turning out now. The early vote was historic.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the complete multivitamin. This multivitamin has the multivitamins that you need as cofactors for enzymatic activity. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get this very high quality multivitamin, which is easy to digest. It's the foundation for my health care protocol. The anti-aging protocol that I keep on talking about. Take a multivitamin, take the probiotics, that's the foundation. Then the Max 35 or Cleanse, that's the first pillar to boost up that immune system. C60 soaks up free radicals. The third pillar, the tumor ashwagandha and lignans, helps to boost up your immune system, and Boomer Boost revs up your metabolism and increases your energy levels. That's a great way to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get those supplements and slow down the aging process.
I mean, broke all records, and I think you're going to see massive lines today. I think they're going to end up holding the voting booths open past 9 o'clock because there are going to be people online. I think this is going to go very late, and it's going to be a historic day.
That was going to be my next question, leads right into it, because do you think we're going to have an answer tonight? The polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is fairly late. But as you said, if folks are in line, they can still vote. So it could close even later. They could keep them open. Will we have an answer tonight? Could it be hours, days?
No,
do we have any idea?
We'll know by 10 o'clock.
I think if the polls are correct, they could stay open till 9. They're going to stay open later. I would not be surprised if they stay open till 10 or 11. Meaning, if you're online, you could stay online. You can't join the line after 9. But I have a feeling once they start releasing numbers, I have a feeling that the judgment of the people is going to be known pretty quickly. That would be my guess. I mean, unless the polls are really off, which they may be. We've had a lot.
I voted this morning, and it was very quick. Very few people were voting. And the ones that were voting were elderly.
Trouble with polling over the last number of cycles, but if the polls are where we think they are, we will have a winner tonight. It may be later than we think, maybe early in the morning, but I would be surprised if New Yorkers don't wake up tomorrow morning and know who their mayor is.
And right here, once again, we do have this live look. This is at one of the polling sites in New York. That is actually, it looks like the polling place or a polling place on the Upper West Side. Now, we also have this one that's coming in, and this is where, in a matter of moments, we should actually see Zoran Mamdani coming in to vote in New York City. Not sure if he's going to make any comments. I imagine folks there are going to try to ask him some questions, but we'll keep an eye on this and bring you those live images as we do get them here. All right, so we've talked a lot about New York City, but it's important to note that there are some...
I cannot stand Mamdani. I cannot stand him. And this city has been taken over by a bunch of ultra liberals. It's crazy. Let's listen into the Hill here.
An elegant touch for an everyday meal. Vanity Fair napkins. Elevate every day.
It's election day in New York City and other places, and at last check, Democratic candidate Zoran Mamdani holds a commanding lead. But just days before millions of New Yorkers would go to the polls, Jeremy Corbyn, a former leader in the UK's Labour Party, took to social media to voice his support of Mamdani. Quote, "Let's get Zoran over the finish line for a New York that's affordable for all." The former British politician also hosted a phone bank alongside the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. That sparked some controversy because Corbyn is especially unliked in Britain and was even ousted from his party in 2020 due to allegations of anti-Semitism. Back then, UK government watchdog accused Corbyn and his office of breaking equality laws, though through allegedly downplaying, belittling, or outright ignoring complaints of anti-Semitism made by Jewish Labour Party members. Corbyn has denied these allegations, saying that they were, quote, overstated for political reasons. But Corbyn's recent alignment with Mamdani has brought a wave of criticism. Mamdani's opponent in the race, Andrew Cuomo, threw his punch on X, writing, quote, "Having Jeremy Corbyn, someone whose party was found to have committed unlawful acts of discrimination against Jewish people under his leadership, phone banking for Zoran Mamdani says everything you need to know. New York doesn't need politics of moral compromise. We need leadership that rejects anti-Semitism, extremism, and division in every form and in every corner." Meanwhile, Ted Cruz also weighed in, writing in his own post, foreign interference, a British anti-Semite supporting a New York City anti-Semite, communists of the world unite.
Mamdani has spoken out about in the past his feelings on Israel, saying in October, quote, "I support the vision of Israel and as a Jewish and democratic state, also a responsibility to uphold international law." And a topic that Zoran obviously has a little point of contention with. We saw him on The View get into it, even that though people would call that like a favorable table for him to have a dialogue at, be challenged up there regarding how he makes sure that he makes Jewish people in New York, which there is a large population, comfortable and clear on his stances. So having Corbyn anywhere around him, even if those are just allegations, his party seems like they would be like, no, thank you. We don't. It has nothing to do with us. Somebody from the UK helping us out.
Isn't it foreign election interference?
Well, I mean, just don't even do anything. Just mind your business. Like, I don't see why that's necessary. But also, Cuomo jumping in here and talking about morals. Not the time or the place, buddy. Like you're not the moral high ground in this race, based on allegations that you have of your own. So I think that's kind of a weird stance to take. Also, Cuomo last night got endorsed basically in a kind of sleight of hand endorsement from President Trump. Yeah, he said basically you have no choice.
Yeah.
He said don't even vote for the Republican. That's a vote for Zoran Mamdani. You have no choice but to vote for Cuomo.
Cuomo is being sold right now to New York Republicans very aggressively. They are, I know a lot of conservative people who live in New York from conservative media. You're usually here in DC or you're in New York. And the friends I have there are, I will tell you, they're really on the fence. Because they want to vote for Curtis Sliwa, but they don't want, and they don't like Andrew Cuomo for all the reasons I don't like him, and many people of all ideological stripes don't like him. His COVID governance was abysmal. He covered up deaths of people that he caused. However, they do not want a socialist to win. So people I know who are of my ideological bent or are more conservative than I am are not sure what to do. They're going to make that decision in the polling booth, whether to vote for Curtis Sliwa or whether to compromise and vote for Cuomo because they don't want Mamdani to win. That's the choice that Republicans I know are weighing right now. It looks still to me very likely that Mamdani is going to win either way, but I don't know. There could be some undercounted Cuomo support because people are going to get into the polling booth and say, "What? We can't have a socialist in charge of New York," and they're going to vote for Cuomo. Maybe. I still think he's probably going to win, but I'm hearing more of this sentiment now.
To see, it's like everyone threw their whole kitchen sink at a local election, which has been so interesting to watch.
It's a local election, but it
was a big city. But I'm just saying, the president involved to this degree. People said that and this is all alleged.
He's a resident.
No, but at some point he was offering jobs, people were saying, to Eric Adams, that he got on the phone with Cuomo. That was reported by the New York Times. So he's deeply involved in this. And it's like, okay, well, sometimes you have to just admit that you might have just lost one. Like, to do all of this now, the day before or the day of election day, it is what it is. Like, the numbers, he's winning in double digits. And not that you should throw in the towel, but to take away all the support when Andrew Cuomo tried to distance himself from you of the Republican candidate and now tell people in a party, oh, go against all your values. Cuomo's going to suddenly change the way that he's governed the city in the past and just lean Republican because we scratch each other's back, even though he's going to try to convince Democrats that he's not really my friend. Like, how is he everyone's friend then? What's he going to do as a leader? You just kind of don't know where Cuomo is.
What is he going to do as a leader? Right. It could be very many bad things, but he's not going to abolish the police department. You're not going to live in a New York where there are literally no police.
Well, that's not actually on the table. So,
well, Mamdani
said that during 2020 when he was treating us slowly. Yes.
3 years ago.
Okay, but now we're talking about present day, and he hasn't touted those policies. What I heard him talking about is trying to get a handle on the housing crisis. What I heard him talking about is trying to bring prices down for New Yorkers on things like groceries. And so even if you don't agree with his strategy, what has translated and what we kept talking about even in the last federal election with the president is that he's speaking to people that are having concerns about paying everyday costs. And so that's what he's doing. Whether you like the way he's speaking to them or not, or the strategies he's proposing, he was successful at proposing strategies that landed. And so if the Republicans really wanted to win, instead of focusing on attacking his character and his Islamic faith, they perhaps should have spent more money trying to attack the problems in New York, which are the prices being probably 10 times what it is in most rural areas around the country, because New York is always an exaggerated price on everything. And people there are suffering because inflation is still high, the economy is still not that great. So like they should have focused on the real issues, the same thing and advice that Republicans gave to Democrats in the last election. Instead of focusing on all these social issues and all this stuff, focus on the economy. Republicans dropped the ball here. And
food security is national security. Phosphate powers America's farmers, but global competitors like Russia and China threaten to control our supply.
Republicans dropped the ball here, and Cuomo dropped the ball here. Everyone was worried about attacking Mamdani. Mamdani was worried about bringing prices down, and that's for this.
I don't think it's correct to say that he was like laser focused just on the economy. He believes in every woke thing. Maybe he's been a little quieter about all that stuff because that doesn't help you get elected anymore.
It's a campaign.
He had some plan to basically to tax areas of New York that are disproportionately white, to tax them more so that white people end up paying a greater share of the tax burden than they already would by being overrepresented in the upper echelons of the tax bracket, a tax bracket that he wants to increase to 52% anyway. There's nothing price combating against more big government, more government management of the economy, more confiscation of people's wealth. Again, these are ideas that have been tried for 100 years.
I can have the same argument about the president. He was arguing he's going to bring prices down, and there's nothing price combating about bringing tariffs up. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter what he's saying on the campaign trail.
Where Trump's gone awry is by implementing policies that are adjacent to socialism. But he's still,
tariffs
are a form of government.
Campaign on bringing prices down.
Tariffs are. I don't care what you campaign on. I care what your actual policy idea. We can all campaign on bringing prices down, but how do you purport to do that? What Trump has purported to do is to use tariffs to make things. He's used tariffs for foreign policy. The immediate result of the tariffs is that the prices of things go up when the government more centrally directs or raises the costs of goods and services, labors. It makes the cost of things go up in the economy. That's exactly what Zoran purports to do as well. So Trump
they're like
has
a
been
similar candidate then, is what I'm saying.
They both adopted left-wing
strategies that worked by campaigning one way and then doing another. I don't know who's going to end up in office. All I'm saying is that Zoran successfully has campaigned and spoke to the voter that wants prices down. So it's the same strategy that President Trump used, and here we are. The poll came out yesterday, the YouGov poll, 60% of people are saying the economy is not great and blaming Trump. So here we are. That's what I'm saying. We can just try it out in New York. President Trump is so stressed about him doing the same exact things that he's doing. People can try it out in New York. Why does the whole country need to be riled up about this? Even though New York's the biggest.
I'm going to try out jamming a fork into an electrical socket. It's never worked for anyone else in any other society, but let's give it a little try. Okay,
we're trying out New York, President Trump as our president of our country.
New York is what
that's a big test.
Fork and you're like, cheer. What happens? You get shot.
We'll see what happens. We'll see. But he wins, so the people speak. We have fair and free elections. He's gonna win. And
this is a classic example where she doesn't know her history. The grand experiment already happened right after World War II. Western Europe was more prosperous than Eastern Europe. Why? Because Eastern Europe was under the umbrella of the Soviet Union and communism. That's why. The grand experiment already happened. There's no country that has been prosperous under socialism. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and don't be this stupid liberal that's been speed-mouthing about how great Mamdani is. Omega-3. Omega-3 will bring down inflammation and help with your lipid profile. This will improve your cardiovascular health. Also, Omega-3 prevents your red blood cells from overclotting. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Omega-3. Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will help you to get rid of that brain fog, focus on your tasks, help to consolidate memory, and over time, it's going to improve your dendritic connections. So you're going to be thinking faster, your memory is going to be much quicker. You'll be able to retrieve faster. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Clarity Factor. This is a great neurostat. Also, this stacks well with C60, and resveratrol. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's important to protect and improve your neurons. Take Clarity Factor, get rid of that brain fog. And a great stack for neural health, Clarity Factor. For your cardiovascular health, omega-3. And better vascular health will lead to better neuron health. Why? Because better blood flow will create a better microenvironment to allow for the neuroplasticity to happen, the positive neuroplasticity, and to have healthy neurons. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Just can't take her. There's so many stupid. I mean, it's just amazing how stupid the liberals are out there. They're crazy. They're crazy. Let's just try something. All right, let's listen to Cuomo.
Right now, New York City mayoral candidate Andrew Cuomo is now speaking after voting in the Manhattan precinct. I want to listen to this. Listen.
I want to thank them for everything they've done. Dewey as a family is special. I did it with my father for many campaigns. A lot of good memories, and it's nice to carry on that legacy. I want to thank you guys who have been on the campaign trail, because this was a long one and this was a hard one, and you guys had a time all over this city, and I know what that's like. And then you have to deal with candidates. It's not always easy. I'm always a pleasure with some of the others. So, job well done for you guys. And I know it's been a long one. I'm feeling very good. I feel the momentum is on our side. If you watch the polls, they've all been moving to us. I've been on the street. I feel it from people. I can tell you this, I voted a lot of times. First time I ever walked into a polling place and the polling place cheered for me. So that's a good sign. And the record turnout is a good sign. I think it's going to be a record. And it's because New Yorkers are concerned. New Yorkers are concerned about New York. And so I'm feeling very good about that. And everything I hear from people is good. So we're going to keep working today. It's not over until it's over. Run through the tape. We're going to be moving around today. Make sure people get out. It's a beautiful day. Get out and vote. The most important election of my lifetime. And I'm not a kid, but this is the most important election of my lifetime. This is going to determine the future of the city of New York. May also determine the future of the Democratic Party. So get out and vote. Thank you. The president does not support me. The president opposes Zoran Mamdani. The president believes Zoran Mamdani is a communist. He believes he's an existential threat. I believe he's a socialist and an existential threat, and not a dress-up socialist, right? Their school of socialism, this Democratic Socialists of America, government controls the means of production. No private ownership of real estate, abolish jails, decriminalize prostitution. This is frightening stuff. And I think that's why you're seeing New Yorkers react and New Yorkers turn out. I'm offering the exact opposite. Safer New York, 5,000 new police, 1,500 police on the subways. Make New Yorkers feel safe again. You want to bring the cost of...
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Myotrol. DrPaulCottrell is offering you Myotrol, which will help you to build muscle. Why? Because Myotrol helps with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. You're going to need to build muscle because this country is going to go to war. You know why? Because we're going to have a communist running New York City. Please, take the Myotrol, do the resistance training. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression, to build muscle and to maintain muscle. Please go to my store and get the Myotrol so you're prepared for the Civil War. Back to Cuomo.
Down, what we have to do, we have to build more affordable housing, the supply and demand. There's nothing tricky to it. The trick is having the confidence in the ability to make the government work to actually build 100,000 units a year. And that's about making the government work, which is what I have done all my life. And that's how you really make change. You make change by understanding how to run the government, tackle the obstacles, move the bureaucracy, move the politics to actually make progress. That's LaGuardia Airport, that's Kennedy Airport, that's Second Avenue Subway. That's the same story over and over and over. You want to make change in government? You think it's easy? You go and say, I want to make change. You know what they say? You can't. You can't. They give you a list of 1,000 reasons why it can't happen. The bureaucracy pushes back. You have to learn how to make that government work to actually deliver for people. And that's what I've done all my life.
That would vote for Mamdani would be a Jew hater. You would agree with him?
I don't know if that's true.
Last question, guys.
This holiday season, every macro bar is more than just a snack. It's a gift to your body, to our planet, to others. When every
Well, I think what you're seeing is a civil war in the Democratic Party that has been brewing for a while. You have an extreme radical left that is run by the socialists that is challenging what they call moderate Democrats. I'm a moderate Democrat. And that contest is what you're seeing here. You're seeing it all across the country. At one time, the Republican Party had a challenge from the far right, the Tea Party. And the moderates pushed back the challenge from the Tea Party. This is the inverse. You have the far socialists who have challenging the moderates. I'm a Democrat like Mario Cuomo, like Bill Clinton, like Barack Obama, like John Kennedy, like their grandfather, their other grandfather, Robert Kennedy. That's my school of democratic politics. And that's what I'm fighting for. The Democrats are not extreme socialism. We're not against the police. We don't believe the NYPD are racist. We don't believe they should be abolished. We don't believe in abolishing jails. We don't believe in doing away with misdemeanors. We don't believe in decriminalizing prostitution. That is not us. We are a party of law and order. David Dinkins, great Democrat. First thing he did when he took office, hire more cops, keep New Yorkers safe. So that's the contest you see happening here. I think the far left socialists work to win. I think long term it would be very detrimental to the future of the Democratic Party. This country is not a socialist country. The city is not a socialist city. The state is not a socialist state. Socialism has never worked anywhere on the globe. Not Venezuela, not Cuba. It's not going to work in New York City.
All right, you were just listening to Andrew Cuomo, the New York City mayoral candidate running as an independent now on election day in New York City, making his final pitch. And you heard him talk about President Trump's endorsement, saying this isn't about support for me. It's about opposing Zoran Mamdani. He has said that multiple times since President Trump endorsed him. And he talked about what he views as his opponent's socialist policies and how he thinks they're going to hurt the city. So there you heard him talking to some of his supporters, thanking them for crisscrossing the city during this campaign. And we'll see how everything turns out. Polls close there around 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes, final thoughts just before the polls close in New York City, making the case why the voters in New York City should not vote for Mamdani, they should vote for him. And he was making the case why he would be a better mayor of New York. Very tough words as far as Mamdani is concerned.
Yeah, and he's really throughout the campaign been pitching himself as someone who would.
The bottom line is this: New York is the bellwether. If we don't hold the line and stop communism, it's going to usher in a whole new wave of communism across America. Brought to you by the educated elite that don't know anything. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract. Go to my store and support capitalism before the communist takeover happens. Get the olive leaf extract. Why? It's dual purpose. It's going to bring down inflammation. And I'm sure you're inflamed by listening to this crap. By bringing down inflammation, you're going to help your immune system. By bringing down inflammation, you're helping your cardiovascular system. And by bringing down inflammation, you're actually helping your neurons. And olive leaf extract helps to control your lipid profile. It helps to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. When you do that, you're reducing plaque formation. So you don't have a heart attack when you're watching Mamdani win the election. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the olive leaf extract and help support capitalism.
Here and big elections in New York City, where Zoran Mamdani is almost certainly going to win as mayor, self-pronounced Democratic Socialist. There are other major elections going on, big proposition in California in terms of whether or not there's going to be redistricting allowed in response to what we saw in Texas. That'll certainly pass by a long margin. Also big elections in New Jersey and in Virginia, where centrist Democrats are likely to win. But it is the New York mayorship that is getting everyone's attention, in part because this is a significant left-wing grassroots populist candidate, extremely young, very different from what the country has been seeing over the past years, and also in a sense a reaction to the populism that we've had on the right with Donald Trump, but a very, very different demographic. Donald Trump appealing to a lot of primarily right-wing, working class, manufacturing base, military communities, men, and these men, many of whom don't have advanced degrees, have felt that the globalization and globalist policies in the United States have not served them, that the endless forever wars that have been fought on their backs have not served them, that the illegal immigration certainly has not served them. And Trump has promised to make America great again for them. Very, very different with what we see from Mamdani. Here it is in urban, primarily advanced education, women, and profession. This is white collar, people who are concerned that they're not going to have the opportunities that they have been promised, that their parents have had, and particularly their kids aren't going to have those opportunities. Some of that is AI displacement. Some of that are big corporations that are not hiring, and a lot of them are letting people go the way that those were the jobs that you kind of thought you were going to get. And I absolutely expect that going forward, we're going to have a wave of left-wing populism that comes from a very, very different place than the right-wing populism that has supported Trump. And interestingly and importantly, the existing Democratic Party is not well situated to pick that up and to attract those voters. And neither is Trump, which means not that Mamdani is going to be a great national figure. I don't expect that, because his personal positions on Israel-Palestine and on identity politics don't necessarily resonate with most of the country. But his economic policies absolutely do. And I think that the candidates that show themselves as most capable of speaking to that level of discomfort, of disruption, and putting policies forward, whether or not they're going to be successful, but making the promises, the campaigns are all about making promises, those are candidates that are likely to succeed in 2026 and 2028. So an important moment, perhaps a bellwether for things to come. The other big thing, of course, is that President Trump wants Mamdani to win as a foil, as someone that he is intending to go to war against, even though he most recently endorsed essentially Andrew Cuomo, someone who has been more personally aligned with him and someone he can do deals with. But Mamdani is more politically expedient and useful, and that is what we are likely to see. More partisanship, more of a gap between Americans on the left and Americans on the right, thinking that each other is the problem. Wish we weren't going to see that. That is where we're heading, and we'll take it from there.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex, the first 4 B vitamins, helps with your mitochondrial health. It helps with the electron transport chain, so you're building more ATP in your cell. And so your cells will perform better because it has more energy. If you notice people that are getting older, they don't have energy, well, that's because their electron transport chain isn't producing enough ATP. So you need the vitamin B complex to help with your electron transport chain for your mitochondria. In addition, vitamin B complex helps with the cellular metabolism. Have you noticed that old people don't have a good metabolism? They have a metabolism that is much slower. Well, taking vitamin B complex will speed up that metabolism. And vitamin B complex is vitamin B12, which helps to protect your neurons. If you notice that old people, they have a tendency to have problems with their gait, balancing issues, and even brain function, well, you need to protect those neurons. Take the vitamin B complex, and this will help to slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Don't vote for Mamdani. Stop socialism in its tracks. Promote capitalism. All right. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. All right, let's listen to Fox Business.
Before we talk Abbott Big Ten blood drive ideas, let's get in the competitive spirit with the scavenger hunt. I worked all weekend on that.
Save lives and help win your school $1 million.
Okay, it's in your nature.
John Cottrell is joining me now, sitting right next to me here in New York City. Okay, if Mamdani wins, and I think he's going to win, you and I have argued about this many times. If and when he wins, do you expect a mass exodus from New York?
I expect that 1% of the pay to 48% of the taxes. I believe that 1%, maybe 20% of them, 25% of them, will find a way to exit maybe 185 days a year.
Yeah, that's right. They'll exit, go someplace else, establish residence, maybe in Florida, for example. But they could still spend 185 days a year in New York City.
They can still come to their favorite restaurants in New York for a few times a year.
Are you leaving?
No, I'm not leaving. Let's see what happens with Jeff Citarelli in New Jersey. I might have to go only across the bridge.
Okay. Well, you have said that if Mamdani wins and he opens these grocery stores, government-run grocery stores, that you'll close your stores. You would run Grispedi's, I think.
Well, it's very hard to compete with City Hall.
You're not going to close your stores, are you?
We don't want to, but let's see what happens. I still don't think that. I'm still praying. We're going to have a long day today. A lot of common sense people are coming out to vote. And I still think I think God saved America by putting in President Trump. God saved the free world by having President Trump. God's going to save New York somehow.
You're getting religious on us. I didn't know that.
Well, President Trump is behind us. So what does that tell you? He takes no prisoners.
Let's move on. Even some Democrats are speaking against Mamdani. Watch this.
Someone asked me before, is Zoran Mamdani the future of the Democratic Party? I said, no, he's the future of the Democratic Socialist Party. He's not a Democrat, and I'm a Democratic capitalist, not a Democratic socialist. And the Democrats need to get back to our basic message of fighting for the middle class and the people who aspire to the middle class, to focus on the economic issues
that made our country strong and made the Democratic Party the party of working families. Seems to me, John, that the Democrats have already surrendered leadership of the party to the left.
Well, that's a big challenge. The common sense Democrats have to put their foot down and say, we're not gonna allow the Socialist Party to take over the Democratic Party. And
Let's talk first about
there's a lot of tough Democrats out there that say it's not gonna happen. But it's gonna take time. Let's see what happens today. Because what happens if Mamdani wins tonight, he not only takes the city, but everybody in New York State has kissed his ring.
Yep.
So he takes the city and the state, and which is a disaster for New York State. And at what point does it blow up? If 25% of the 1% move out, and the taxes are no longer here,
You got a problem.
who's going to pay the pensions?
You got a real problem.
And don't forget the working class people, the Teamsters, etc., they're voting for Donald Trump.
Hope springs eternal in New York City, does it not? John, thanks for being with us this morning. We're going to have a big day. Before we leave you, Tom.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help capitalism. Get the elderberry zinc lozenges. Be prepared for the fall and the winter. Really important this fall and winter that you have the lozenges and the drops. Once you have that throat irritation, take them right away to mitigate the problem. You can also get it in honey and lemon, in cherry flavor, and also in blueberry for the drops. Get a few bags for your household. Be prepared for the fall and the winter. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Election today, or not just one election, there's a few elections, isn't there? The mayor race in New York City and then gubernatorial contest in Virginia and New Jersey. What's the significance?
Well, first of all, anytime you get real voters casting actual votes, it does give you a pretty reliable barometer, at least of what people in those 3 locations, New York City, Virginia, and New Jersey, are thinking. And the Democrats are obviously hoping to pull off wins in all 3 races today, plus also a ballot proposition out in California that would allow Gavin Newsom to redraw congressional boundaries and boost the number of seats that Democrats can count on in next year's midterm elections in response to Republican gerrymandering that has been taking place in other states. All eyes, of course, are on New York City. Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat socialist who is running for mayor of New York. He wants to make the buses free in New York. He wants to extend rent regulation on more than 1 million properties. He's talking about opening 5 city-owned supermarkets in a bid to try and bring food prices down. He is anathema to Donald Trump and to the captains of industry and commerce and finance in New York City, but he's also someone that many Democratic Party grandees are keeping at arm's length. Take a listen to what Hillary Clinton had to say the other day. She was asked who she's planning to vote for in the New York City mayoral race.
You know what? I don't vote in this city. I'm not involved in it. I have not, been at all even asked to be involved in it, and I have not chosen to be involved in it.
She was talking there to the Unholy podcast, which explores issues pertaining to the Jewish community around the world and also to the relationship that various countries have with Israel. Zoran Mamdani, of course, is about to become the first Muslim, Indian-American, Democratic Socialist mayor of New York. So take a listen to what happened next on that Unholy podcast.
Do the Jews in the city have a reason to be concerned? We'll have to see what happens. I hope not. I do not believe that we are able to predict what's going to happen. I can't sit here and tell you.
It's an extraordinary answer, that, because it really reveals the depth of anxiety that elites within the Democratic Party have about this firebrand young radical who is about to become the next mayor of New York City, going to win by a massive margin, we think, tonight. And he's really sending a message to the Democratic Party writ large that the party has to change.
And people like Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the New York senator who leads Democrats in the United States Senate, they've all kept him at arm's length because they are deeply concerned that that kind of populist left-wing radical is going to become a galvanizing figure for young grassroots Democrats and really challenge the elites within the party and tell them it's time for them to push off.
So we're seeing something similar here in a way, as if the established opposition has lost the room almost, and that I choose my words carefully because we haven't seen him in action yet, and some of what he's said and done has been very impressive. But the perceived maverick hoovers up votes because people are sick of the status quo.
Yes, but there is a real challenge coming for the Democratic Party arising out of these elections, because if you go just south of us here in Washington, D.C. to Virginia, the Democrat who is expected to win that race for the gubernatorial mansion tonight is a centrist, Abigail Spanberger, and she has literally said, she's on a leaked audio tape to prominent Democrats, that the party needs to stop even using the word socialist, that the word socialist is a complete switch off to the country. And if you carry on going out there and campaigning from the left and talking about being a socialist, you are going to lose the next election cycle. Well, she's going to become, we think, the next governor of Virginia tonight. So there's mixed messages coming from Democrats. On the one hand, in New York City, they're about to embrace someone of the left who describes himself as a democratic socialist. In Virginia, more conservative state to be sure, they are coalescing around a centrist figure who has said we shouldn't even be using these words, these buzz phrases that turn voters off. So the party's going to emerge from this off-year election, I think, in an even more confused state than it went into it, searching for leaders, but also still having to have an internal conversation with itself about what kind of path it wants to put itself on if it's ever going to combat Donald Trump's Make America Great Again populism.
Fascinating. I mean, genuinely fascinating, and all the more reason to speak to you soon about how things unfold. But of course, you could, or the United States could be at war with Nigeria by that point.
Absolutely astonishing. This announcement by President Trump on his social media channel over the weekend came seemingly out of nowhere, accusing the Nigerian government of standing by while Christians are being massacred in the country. We know that that message was fueled in part by Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, who himself has focused extensively on what is taking place in Nigeria. But what is actually taking place in Nigeria certainly is seeing the murder of a large number of Christians in the country, but it's also seeing the murder of an even larger number of Muslims in Nigeria who are equally being targeted by Boko Haram and other Islamic fundamentalist terror groups. For them, not a solitary word was expressed by Donald Trump on Saturday as he threatened to send the US military in to Nigeria to kill the Islamic fundamentalists that he claims are responsible for massacring Christians. And he put the Nigerian government on notice. The government, he said, better act fast, otherwise the military's coming. If you're a Make America Great Again supporter, and you've backed the concept of Donald Trump being the peacemaker who's not going to get involved in far off and distant conflicts about which we know very little, I mean, you'd think that Nigeria might tick those boxes, but on Saturday, he certainly was very focused on it.
Well, at least we can all agree he has. What's the running total now? He has ended 406 wars. Is that right? and mounted. Fantastic. Simon Marks, many thanks indeed. Like, from Washington, D.C., where American politics, US politics shows no sign of calming down anytime soon.
Luck is just when preparation meets opportunity.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and support capitalism before New York and the rest of the country go communist. get the ashwagandha root. This will help to control your cortisol levels, because I'm sure your cortisol levels are elevated to the moon because Mamdani's going to win. You got to bring down those cortisol levels, because elevated cortisol levels, especially if they're chronic, will cause tissue damage and be immunosuppressive. By taking ashwagandha root, you're controlling your cortisol levels to help your immune system. Also, ashwagandha root will help to control your blood glucose levels. Please go to my store, get the ashwagandha root. This will help with your cardiovascular health and also your immune system.
Or having at least some of these food stamps covered, and how long can the administration keep that going?
Well, assuming they're talking about depleting the emergency fund, that's roughly $6 billion, and food stamps for an entire month under SNAP benefits is over $9 billion. So, you know, theoretically, this will extend benefits for a few weeks. But again, we shouldn't even be in this situation. This should have been resolved weeks ago. House Republicans passed the Clean CR back in the middle of September to keep the government funded and open and fully fund SNAP and WIC through November 21st so that we could actually negotiate over the final appropriations package, as well as other issues, including the ACA tax credits. But Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, voted 14 times to defund SNAP, to defund WIC, to make sure that our military, our air traffic controllers, our border patrol agents were not getting paid. So while it's important that we make sure SNAP is funded and deplete the emergency fund, the fact is all of this could be resolved very simply if Senate Democrats would do their job, as they did 13 times under Joe Biden, and vote yes to fund the government.
Yeah, I mean, we know where you're at on this, Congressman. I wonder, do you believe the polling when it comes to the blame game? Because this does seem to be informing some Democrats' decisions on this. The NBC polls, the most recent, 45% of Americans blame Republicans, 33% blame Democrats. Do you buy those numbers?
Well, this is what's fundamentally wrong. If you're governing by polls, if you're governing based on politics, this is why crap doesn't get done. The fundamental point here is that there's a very simple solution. The clean continuing resolution. Both parties have passed it over the years. There's no reason to shut the government down. All you're doing is creating hardship for the American people. You're using people that rely on benefits like SNAP and WIC. As Chuck Schumer said, quote, every day gets better for us. And as Catherine Clark said, this is about leverage. It's wrong. I don't care who's quote unquote winning based on the polls. The American people are losing because of the stupidity being played in Washington. Pass the Clean CR, fund the government, make sure programs like SNAP and WIC have the resources needed for the American people to put food on their tables. It's not a game.
You know, we were just talking
that this is what people are focused on, whether or not who's winning in the polls. Who cares? Well, that's not the issue.
We were just talking to the old Senate sage, Bill Hoagland, before you joined us. I don't know if you heard any of our conversation. The fact that the date on the CR could soon begin to be a challenge. Even if Democrats showed up tomorrow and said, hey, we're gonna do something different here, we're gonna start voting or talking, we'd be walking up against a potential shutdown again on November 21st. I know how many times you've made clear that Democrats have voted against this, but at a certain point, the timeline is gonna be broken, right? Do we need to extend that, put a new date on it? What would be the process in changing that deadline?
Well, clearly, there's going to have to be an additional CR after the November 21st deadline. But in the immediate, they need to end this shutdown. So they need to vote yes on the CR that's been sitting in the Senate for over a month. And then we can focus on an extension, whether it's through the end of the year, whether it's into January of next year. I don't think there is support for a full year CR. I think there's a lot of issues that have to be addressed as part of the appropriations process. So I'm not in favor of a full year CR. I think most members are not in favor of a full year CR. We got to get to work, and we need to ensure that the government agencies are funded, that the workforce is being paid, that critical programs like SNAP and WIC are fully funded. Let's do our jobs, and that requires passing the Clean CR that's been sitting in the Senate for over a month, Then obviously we're gonna need to pass an additional CR, date to be determined. But the objective should be to finish the appropriations work before the end of the year.
I have to admit, I was surprised to hear Jason Smith, who chairs the Ways and Means Committee, tell us on the air that he supported a full year CR, which gives us a sense of how difficult appropriating has become. Congressman, I want to ask you about the mayoral race here in town. President Trump was asked about it on 60 Minutes. You probably heard what he said about Andrew Cuomo. Let's let everyone hear for the sake of our audience. Here's the president on CBS.
It's going to be hard for me as the president to give a lot of money to New York because if you have a communist running New York, all you're doing is wasting the money you're sending there. So I don't know that he's one, and I'm not a fan of Cuomo one way or the other, but if it's going to be between a bad Democrat and a communist, I'm going to pick the bad Democrat all the time, to be honest with you.
Where's your head on this, Congressman? If it is, as it appears, there's going to be a New York mayor, Mamdani. If that in fact happens, do you worry about federal funding for the city?
Well, it's interesting to see President Trump and Mike Bloomberg on the same page. I know Mike Bloomberg has supported and endorsed Andrew Cuomo. From my vantage point, it's a little bit of a bridge too far to endorse Andrew Cuomo for me. So many of the challenges facing New York, from cashless bail to sanctuary state policies to shutting down Indian Point and banning natural gas, were policies at his hands. But as the president said, when given a choice, and in this case, based on the polls, the choice is really between Mamdani and Cuomo. It's a choice between the lesser of two evils. As far as I'm concerned, an avowed socialist Marxist who talks about seizing the means of production, banning private property ownership, freezing the rent, raising taxes by $9 billion on New Yorkers. He wants to defund the police, legalize prostitution, shut down prisons, free busing, government-run grocery stores. These policies have never worked wherever they've been tried. Part of the reason why we have had so much immigration into the United States is because people are fleeing countries that promote these policies, whether it be in Eastern Europe or in South and Central America. They don't work. And yet here we are on the verge of electing an avowed socialist as mayor of New York City, the financial capital of the world. You will see a mass exodus out of New York. It's not just about federal dollars. The tax base will deplete because businesses and those who can afford to leave will. And that will be catastrophic for New York. It's part of the reason why yesterday when Kathy Hochul and Hakeem Jeffries were both asked, is Zohran Mamdani the future of the Democratic Party? They both stuttered and stammered and couldn't get out of there fast enough, because they know this is a disaster for the Democratic Party to have an avowed socialist leading the charge in New York City. He will become the face of the Democratic Party. And it is not good for New York. As a lifelong New Yorker, this is a disaster. And it's part of the reason why, when people go to vote tomorrow, choose wisely, because this is going to be catastrophic.
Client's road to retirement starts with confidence, knowing you're working with an industry.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and stop Mamdani. Get the turmeric. This will bring down inflammation and also soak up free radicals. There are a lot of free radicals in New York. Turmeric will help with your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. And by bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level, guess what? You're helping to protect those neurons. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the turmeric. It's gonna get scary. Mamdani might win. Mamdani might win. All right, let's see here. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg.
Out with its latest poll showing a 2 percentage point lead by Mikey Sherrill, and most of the other polls are in basically a 1 to 5 percentage point range right now, with Sherrill up ahead. And remember, that is with not only within the margin of error, but you're talking about a state, Joe, that despite the sort of reputation for being a Democratic state, only about 38% of the voters, of the registered voter here, are Democrat, about 25% Republicans, about 35% are independents. And those are the ones that are really going to potentially call this election. Those are the voters that Jack Ciattarelli has been courting hard. He's also spent a lot of time in some of the Democratic strongholds here, including where I'm standing here in Jersey City. He spent some time this weekend in what is not only an overwhelmingly Democratic city, but probably one of the most diverse cities in the entire country. He spent a lot of time at some of the churches with predominantly Black and Latino members, and he is really making a big push to convince those folks that the last 4 years of a Democratic governor under Phil Murphy did not serve them well, and that their fortunes would somehow improve under a Republican administration led by him.
Really interesting, Romaine. New Jersey has not voted for a Republican president in more than 30 years, has not voted for a Republican senator in more than 50 years. To what extent would this test history, knowing as well that New Jersey has a reputation for toggling between Democrats and Republicans at the top?
Well, if you want to answer to that, I think all you have to do is look right now at the RNC. You go back 4 years ago when Jack Ciattarelli ran for governor. Remember, this is the third time that he's run for governor here. He did not get a lot of support from the federal level, meaning the National Republican Party, in terms of money or even just visibility. And that has changed in a big way. Even though Donald Trump himself has not physically been on the campaign trail with Ciattarelli, a lot of his surrogates have shown up with him. A lot of the Republican members of Congress have been out here. A lot of members of the RNC and elsewhere have been out here as well. And they funneled a lot of cash to his campaign. They look to what Donald Trump did over the last few years, losing to Biden 4 years ago by a 16-point margin, but then losing to Kamala Harris just last year by only a 5 percentage point margin. And that has a lot of Republicans in Washington thinking that maybe, just maybe, they can even flip this state when we get to the next presidential election in 3 years.
That would be something, Romaine. Really glad you're out there for us, and we'll be checking back in with Romaine Bostic throughout the day and throughout the evening with special election coverage starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, an extended edition of Balance of Power on the late side. I do want to mention quickly, as we throw the full...
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lignans. Lignans will help your immune system and your endocrine system bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. By doing that, you're helping your cardiovascular health, your brain function, and your immune system. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off. All right, let's go to MSNBC. New York City voters voice excitement and concerns this election day.
Let's take these one by one, guys, starting here in the Big Apple. Michael, one of the candidates for mayor here, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, just cast his vote. What issues are driving voters to the poll?
Yeah, Anna, like you said, we're here in Midtown Manhattan at a polling place where former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo was just here casting his ballot in this race. Already, roughly 735,000 voters in New York City have voted. That was the early voting data, shattering the number of folks who voted early back in 2021. I think that underscores the enthusiasm that a lot of voters have with this election. But of course, there are also some jitters among voters who are hopeful that their favorite candidate ekes out a win here. Now, some of the biggest issues we've been hearing about, of course, affordability is one of them, the cost of living. It's something that Assemblyman Zoran Mamdani has been focusing his campaign very strongly on. But what we've heard from Cuomo is he wants to keep the party more at a Democratic moderate pace. We know that Mamdani is a Democratic socialist. Cuomo has wanted to keep the party in New York City led by a moderate hand. Now, we spoke to voters. Listen to some of what they had to say about today's race.
The feel of like going in there, voting for the first time. They started like, hey, first time voters. So that added to the excitement of everything. And I was just happy to do my part of voting. I'm very nervous about this election and the state of what the city can become with the outcome of the election.
Ever since I was 18 years old, I would get up on election day proud. It is my duty, my responsibility for the privileges that I have as an American.
Now, Anna, you mentioned it. President Trump, of course, not on the ballot on this election day, but looming large over a number of races, including the mayor's race here in New York City. Just last night, he endorsed Andrew Cuomo in the race, saying that a Democrat would be a better choice than Zohran Mamdani. I asked actually Andrew Cuomo about that endorsement just a few minutes ago after he voted at this polling place. I said, do you accept this endorsement? Of course, the candidates have been battling over their proximity to President Trump throughout this race. He said the president was not endorsing me. He was expressing his opposition to Mamdani. So voting underway here in the Big Apple with a close and high stakes race between the candidates.
Michael Schnell, thanks for bringing us the latest. Christina, in just the past 24 hours or so, we have President Trump and Elon Musk both endorsing Cuomo. Does that shake up the race at all?
I think, it makes things a little more difficult for Curtis Sliwa, especially some Republicans who might be on the fence and just rather Cuomo than, Zohran Mamdani. But let's be clear, the president said, do you want a communist or a bad Democrat? And, Zohran Mamdani is absolutely not a communist and it's been very clear that that's not the case. So I think one or two things will happen, Anna. Either it'll be a nail biter and Andrew Cuomo will get a lot more support than anticipated, or as the polls would show, or it'll be actually a blowout since we've sort of undercounted, close to 1 million Muslim New Yorkers who were there, first-time voters, young people who've been mobilized by this Mamdani campaign, and so many other demographics as he's gone to all 5 boroughs consistently since, January, essentially, when the race really began.
Larry, what early signs are you looking at ahead of polls closing here in New York City?
Well, you certainly want to see what the election day turnout is. There was a big turnout, obviously, of early voting. I've been through a lot of election cycles, and I've learned close to election day, the candidate who is losing sells to the media easily the idea that it's closing, because if it's closing, it's more interesting to viewers. That doesn't mean it's really closing. And it is hard to believe that Donald Trump would have enough oomph in New York City to change the results, but we'll all see tonight.
Let's head across the river to New Jersey now. Jake, President Trump made inroads there in 2024, but he did not campaign in person for Republican gubernatorial pick Jack Ciattarelli. This race has been tightening. Who has the momentum? Why?
Yeah, Anna, we'll start wide and then we can zoom in. Look, New Jersey is a widely notable state. In 2024, Donald Trump made a lot of inroads here, as you said. He closed the gap by 10 points compared to 2020. That was the second most of any state in the entire country during the 2024 election. So a lot of the Republican candidate, Jack Ciattarelli's campaign, has been centered around how does he get some of those MAGA Trump voters to come out to the polls whenever Trump's not actually on the ballot. And so far during Jack Ciattarelli's campaign, what we've seen a lot of is Donald Trump and Ciattarelli kind of aligning themselves with the same MAGA agenda. That's up until recently, as early as yesterday, whenever some unfavorable polling came out about Donald Trump, and that a lot of the country does not see him in this favorable manner. Ciattarelli was asked about his alignment with Trump and about what national precedent this sets. And Ciattarelli kind of pivoted, putting some daylight between himself and Donald Trump, saying that ultimately this is a local race. It's not about national politics. That was a notable shift in some of his tone. But the individuals that we're speaking here today, every single person I've spoken with, when I asked them what the top issue we're concerned about, whether they're voting for the Democrat Mikey Sherrill or whether they're voting for Ciattarelli, they say it is about affordability. It is about who can cut our taxes for us. Listen to one single mother that I spoke with a bit about that.
Property tax is killing me, honestly, as a resident of the state and as a single mother. And also just what we've seen with the increased cost of electricity as well. A lot of it is financially driven for me as a resident of the state and looking at other states and their policies and what they pay and what we pay here.
Now, Ciattarelli's campaign said that he voted last week, so we won't be seeing him at a polling location today. We can't expect to see him at a couple of diners popping up around the state and talking to a person. Obviously, as things continue to go throughout the days, we continue to talk to different voters in this high stakes race. We'll come back to you with the latest.
Sounds like a plan. Jake Traylor, thank you. Christina, the New Jersey and the New York races sort of pose an interesting juxtaposition. You have Democrats with really different views, kind of far ends of the party spectrum here. Could tonight help the DNC find its identity?
Sadly, I don't think that that's the case. The Democrat The Democratic Party has a very wide tent, which is fantastic. There's lots of ideological diversity within the tent. I think that it does matter how much, let's say, Mamdani wins this evening, by what margin. Hopefully that'll signal to Democrats, instead of thinking about consultants figuring out the messaging, why don't we go to a hyper-local conversation and actually ask voters? This is what Zara Mamdani did. He found out that the main issue was not public safety as it was in 2021. It was affordability. It was a very clear and consistent message over the last few months. And so hopefully the Democrats will take that lesson, not just trying to transport what happened in New York if it's a success and transport it across the country, but to actually ask voters what it is that they want and need, and possibly find candidates that excite voters so that they actually go out to the polls and participate.
Larry, the Justice Department, we know, is dispatching election monitors to New Jersey, at least one county there. Federal election monitors have been sent across the country for decades. So why is this move raising such concerns? And what are you looking at in New Jersey?
Well, it's because it's the Trump administration, and the Justice Department under Trump is not always evenly balanced. I think that's maybe the understatement of this election. So people are right to watch the monitors, to monitor the monitors carefully. But what I'm looking for is obviously who wins and what the margin is. And you want it to be more than a squeaker if it's Cheryl. But if Cheryl wins, and she is still favored, she's a moderate liberal, moderate Democrat, moderate liberal. The same is true in Virginia. Spanberger, who's expected to win, is a moderate liberal former congresswoman. And you know what? I think the Democratic leadership is prepared to make a contrast, as they should, between Mamdani, who is very progressive and calls himself a democratic socialist, and the two moderate liberals, more mainstream candidates in New Jersey and Virginia. It's not that they're so different on every issue. It's that the Democratic Party, as Christina just said, can be a big tent, should be a big tent. If they're ever going to get a majority back in the two legislative bodies at the national level, and more important, maybe the legislative bodies in the 50 states, they need to be diverse in the images they project to voters.
Let's zoom in on the Virginia race, also electing a new governor there, Allie. Either candidate will make history as the state's first female governor, but the shutdown is hitting Virginia particularly hard because of so many federal workers there. How is that and Trump's economic message playing in tonight's results there?
That was one of the central questions that I came into this race with, Anna, was the way that federal workers who have been impacted by many Trump administration actions, from DOGE in the early days and weeks of the administration, now to this ongoing government shutdown, is this a moment for them to register that concern, that outrage, that frustration, or a chance to double down on the kind of Republican governance that they've had in the state for the last several years under Glenn Youngkin? For his lieutenant governor, Winsome Earl-Sears, that is what she's pitching voters, a continuation of what they have had. For Abigail Spanberger, it's a much different message. Yes, focused on affordability, but also focused on fighting for Virginia workers, several of whom I've talked to today and say, well, I'm actually at this polling place at this time right now because I'm a furloughed federal worker. Others of them say that they're motivated to be here for other reasons, but that is one of the key issues that I was drilling down on, is what is the impact of the shutdown, the furloughs, the stuff that the federal workers have had to deal with. This is what one voter told me just a few minutes ago.
It hits close to home. I have a few friends that are furloughed right now. They have children, they have families to feed, and I think it's important to exercise my right.
Do you have like a party that you're blaming for the shutdown?
No, not at all. I just think that it's who the person is and what they believe in and how they want to push America forward.
So it's a good reminder for us that even though all of these issues are swirling in the pot and voters are aware of all of these different dynamics, sometimes for them, the politics is very much local. And that's what we have seen here at this polling place. So I've had just as many voters, Anna, say to me that they feel that this is a moment where they can register concern and frustration with the Trump administration. I will tell you also, as we've been out here all day, you've of course got Democratic canvassers, got Republican canvassers across from them, a lot of foot traffic here. I actually just got an update from one of the election officials inside who say that at around this time just a year ago, so in a presidential general election year, they saw slightly less traffic than they're seeing today. This traffic greater than what it was in a presidential year, sort of speaking to potentially some of the excitement that you're seeing in an area that is a Democratic stronghold. Larry knows this so well, and the kind of place that Spanberger and the rest of the Democratic ticket are going to have to drive up their turnout, drive up their vote if they want to continue to bear out what the polls have shown, which is that this really is maybe Spanberger's race to lose.
And this remains a blue state.
Yeah, I mean, let's remember that first. I mean, New Jersey is a blue, pretty
There's a reason why
blue
Donald
state.
Trump did not come here, right? Would
Exactly.
He would not have helped Jack Ciattarelli.
No, and he wasn't really going to have help in Virginia either. I mean, yesterday, obviously, he did the telecom hall, or whatever he did at the last minute, but no, that's going to isolate. I mean, it's a little bit like how Pennsylvania used to be, but New Jersey is solid oil. And I think it's going to be very difficult for the Republican candidate.
You're right about
Do you
that.
like how measured I'm being?
You were, well, you always. You're always. In Virginia, he didn't mention Winston Earl Sears' name in the tele rally last evening. So maybe we should discount the Trump factor for a minute in both of these races and talk about what's actually driving voters. Virginia is a really different race. Abigail Spanberger is a really different candidate. There have been questions about candidate quality for your party in Virginia. You share them?
Yeah, I mean, 4 years ago, we had the best candidate ever with Glenn Youngkin during a time where he fought against kind of woke issues in schools and in companies in corporate America, and that's what he won on. You can't use that same argument now 4 years later. So she has tried to do that against Spanberger. She has run towards the middle. If you look at her voting record, that's not necessarily the case, but that's how she's run, and people aren't paying attention to her voting record. She's a likable candidate.
That's got so much to do with all of this, right? How about Mikey Sherrill? Because there are questions about someone who has such a great story to tell about her career, but also has had a real challenge delivering that message against a formidable candidate in Jack Ciattarelli.
Well, and she also has some skeletons that have come out against her over the last 6 months, but I mean.
The Annapolis, the cheating scandal in Annapolis. Is that what you're referring to?
Correct, and some stock issues that she's had, but at the end of the day, I mean, we are in New Jersey. I mean, this is New Jersey, so they're kind of used to.
Hey,
one of their senators is in jail right now. Just kidding.
I love that we're having this conversation in New York. Zoran Mamdani, unless an asteroid, I guess, hits us tonight, he's going to be the next mayor of New York. Is that good in a sort of a contrarian way for the Republican message? Donald Trump just got his greatest foil.
Absolutely. I think who it's good for is Elise Stefanik, who is going to be announcing governor probably here at the beginning of the year. So she has something to run against.
Yeah.
And she has something to run against, especially because of the Governor Hochul, who she will be running against, has endorsed the new mayor-elect, I would expect tomorrow.
What do you think when you see Elon Musk and Stephen Miller endorsing Andrew Cuomo? I mean, the Republican message is.
Well, I'm sure Andrew Cuomo, just like when the Trump endorsed him, I'm sure he's like crawling under a rock a little bit, like he doesn't want the endorsement.
Yeah. We have big news today, and I actually would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the life of Dick Cheney. We lost Dick Cheney, at least we found out about it this morning. And this is someone who crossed multi-generations, multiple administrations, went from Congress to run the Pentagon to be a vice president who arguably reinvented that role. And he's someone you worked closely with. How are you thinking of him today?
Absolutely, and always want to give my condolences to Lynn and Liz and Mary, his girls. I mean, look, I was very fortunate at a young age in my 20s to have my office beside his in the West Wing. I was with him on 9/11, and he truly was a mentor in regards to how to act and how to put yourself forward in this political world, and taught me a lot. The reason I read The Economist every week is because Dick Cheney told me I needed to read it every week. I'm like, yes, sir. But no, he's a good guy. Listen, he's a loyal guy. He's a good guy. There's a lot of people that didn't believe in his politics. He believes in America. He loved our country. He has an extraordinary life and career.
Yeah.
And we lost a true patriot.
We only have a minute left, which is always when I ask you the hard questions. But what was his posture? What was his demeanor that day? You were with him on 9/11.
Oh, Colin, I mean, this was what, it was he and Norman, and I don't know if you remember when he was Secretary of Transportation at the time, and the president was obviously in Florida. And the two of them were in charge of working with FAA to call down the remaining planes in the air to make sure our airspace was clear, because we didn't know what else was hijacked at the time.
Yes.
So very
That's the first word that you reached for. That's
fascinating.
You're flying home. Good luck. This ground stop is for real. I'm just looking at this now. Reagan Airport. Oh,
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, or extra virgin olive oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce for the higher ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. What this will do is soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times more potent than vitamin C. It's going to soak up free radicals, bring down stress in your cell, and help the health of the mitochondria so you have more energy. Your cells will perform better, your tissues will perform better, your organ systems will perform better. By soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. And by bringing down inflammation and soaking up those free radicals for your neurons, you're helping the health of the neuron, you're increasing the energy in the neuron, and therefore improving the neuroplasticity. So you'll be thinking faster and have better memory. In addition, by taking C60 regularly, you're improving your basal layer, so your skin improves. You will look younger. You will look younger within 1 year. Before and after, if you take C60, a teaspoon a day, every day, you will look younger in 1 year. Now, you'll start feeling the effects, better immune system, better endocrine system, within about 2 months. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and take the C60. Take it every day, a teaspoon a day, every day. Soak up those free radicals and slow down the aging process and boost up that immune system. That's the broadcast for today. Thank you for listening. Please go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer.